Chapter 11:14. In a certain office in China, the old man who once suppressed many people was sitting there looking at the documents in his hands. In this era, paper was still the carrier of many documents. The most important point was that it was far more secure than the security of the internet. This was an irreplaceable advantage of paper. "Come in," the old man ordered when he heard the knock on the door. "Sir, there's news about the Empress and the gate." The middle-aged secretary walked in quickly. "What news?" The old man's face, which was as calm as an ancient well, began to fluctuate with the news. "The Empress and the gate are fine. I just contacted Yang's son, the director of the Messier 87 Bureau." The secretary's face was full of disbelief. They actually survived that kind of situation, and according to Yang Sen's report, there were no injuries. The old man was also a little surprised, and then there was a smile in his eyes. As expected of the Empress and the gate, this is the path of human beings we pursue, a strong body and super personal strength. Now, we can finally prove it. The old man understood very well that the two of them must have left the moment they were attacked. Under normal circumstances, the two of them would have returned to Shanghai or even Wuji City before leaving. Since the two of them were fine, it meant that they had reacted at the moment of the attack, either resisted the explosion or left the earth the moment they reacted. Either way, it showed the ability of the two of them. Thanks to Sir for suppressing those people. Otherwise, when those two people came back, there would be a big mess. The secretary said admiringly. The old man waved his hand. After all, they have been cooperating with the country for so long. It is reasonable to see someone jump out to get a share of the rich right after something happened to them. In any case, it's good that they are back. Where are they? What are they doing now? With the temperament of those two people, I'm afraid they won't give up after such a thing happened. They will most likely make a big scene. Yes, as Sir said, they immediately asked Director Yang to arrange for someone to pick them up and asked for the addresses of all the officials of the Rising Sun City. When the secretary said this, he really felt that the two of them were terrible. They actually wanted to make a move on all the senior officials of the Rising Sun City. However, they had the strength and confidence to do so. I'm afraid they are looking for the wrong people, but the Rising Sun City can't be completely separated. The old man smiled faintly. They are not two people, but 9, the secretary added. "Oh, they've mobilized troops," the old man said with some interest. After thinking for a while, he said, "Connect me to Yang's son from the Messier 87 Bureau." "Thank you very much, sir. However, since someone else was involved, they weren't treated unjustly." "Don't worry, I know who the culprit is. Since I'm here, I'll find trouble with them first. I'll kill those who deserve to be killed and beat up those who deserve to be beaten up before finding trouble with the United States." Ren Baqian smiled at the elder. "If this fire doesn't go out, you probably won't be able to sleep. It's good that you know what to do," the old man said with a smile. The two of them chatted for a while before he switched off the communication device. He actually received a call from that big boss. It was really unexpected, but was also reasonable. He had already contacted Wuji City and Wanyan. Nothing had happened in the past few days. Ren Baqian originally wanted to see if any bugs would jump out and take this opportunity to kill them all. According to Wanyan, there were indeed some people who were ready to make trouble, but they were all suppressed by that mister just now. This made Ren Baqian have a good impression of him. In addition, the nation had always been on his side regarding Ning Saichen's matter, which made him feel quite satisfied. With such a leader, he didn't have to worry about any twists and turns in his cooperation with the nation for the next 20 to 30 years. Given his age and physical condition, it wouldn't be a problem for him to maintain this position for a few decades. After waiting for more than 2 hours, four limousines appeared on the side of the cliff. A person got out of one of the limousines. It was the military officer from the embassy whom they had met before. His surname was Lu Huaning. Everyone who had been waiting impatiently jumped down from the top of the cliff. The heavy landing sound gave Lu Huaning a shock. He turned his head and saw Ren Baqian, the Empress, and a few other people. Other than Ren Baqian, all the men were wearing retro robes with large sleeves. As for the two women, one was wearing a full suit of armor, and the other was wearing a strapless short skirt. The most eye-catching thing was the weapons in everyone's hands. There were sabers, mace, broadswords, and swords with cold glints and a faint smell of blood. In addition to a sword, the woman in armor also carried a bow and a quiver of arrows on her waist. "Thank you." Rinpoche nodded at Lu Huaning and got into the back seat of the first car with the Empress. The others also got into the other cars. "Hey, this isn't as comfortable as ours. It's too stifling." Qin Chuan groaned as soon as he got into the car. The interior of Dayo's cars was enlarged and naturally couldn't be compared to these limousines. However, there was a 100-year gap in stability, noise, and other aspects. "Where are you guys going first?" Lu Huaning asked as he got into the front passenger seat. "Let's eat first. Get someone to prepare enough food for 3,000 people and prepare more meat," Rinpoche said. "Find a secluded place. We still have work to do in a while, so don't alarm people in case they run away." "Understood." Lu Huaning immediately responded, but he was speechless. Sure enough, the stronger one was, the more they ate. Judging from their appetite, these people were the best of the best. It had to be said that preparing enough food for 3,000 people wasn't an easy task, especially in order to hide the fact that the food had to be as exquisite and delicious as possible. Even the embassy had to put in a lot of effort. This kind of concealment could only be done for one day at most. Rinpoche was the fastest to finish his meal. He then turned on the projector and flipped through some information. "Get someone to take us to the locations of these people in a while." Rinpoche casually pointed at a few people. The first one was the Empress, who was only 34 years old and had only been on the throne for 2 years. A few key princes, the Prime Minister, the Minister of the Interior, the Minister of Defense, the Permanent Undersecretary of Defense, the Chief of the Defense Staff, the Deputy Chief of the Defense Staff. Liang Xiu looked at the names that Rinpoche pointed at and smiled bitterly. He knew that something big would happen this time, but he didn't expect the other party to be so ambitious. More than half of the upper echelons of the Rising Sun City were among the other party's targets. "We can't show our faces in this matter," Liang Cheng said first. Rinpoche's actions were his business, but China couldn't be involved. All he could do was get someone to lead the way and then send them back to China. "I know." Rinpoche nodded. "The Deputy Chief of the Defense Staff and the Minister of the Interior of China aren't in the fog capital. Prince Charles and Prince Henry are in the United States, and we don't know the locations of the others. The Empress is in Buckingham Palace. The Prime Minister should be in his residence at this time, and the Minister of Defense, as far as I know, is attending Sir Mason's banquet today. In fact, you can just look for the Empress, the Prime Minister, and the Minister of Defense. As far as we know, the officials of the Rising Sun Empire aren't involved in this matter." Rinpoche nodded slightly. If he didn't say the last sentence, he would have asked what exactly could they do. If you want to make a move, it's best not to do it in a crowded place. You will still go to the United States later, right? If your existence is known, it will be easy for the United States to get the news. After all, your existence itself is noticed by a lot of people. When that time comes, it will be more troublesome to go to the United States. Give me another plane and arrange a flight route. It must be hidden and fast. I will go to the United States in 3 hours. Don't get blown up this time. I can get you a Concorde B-2 commercial plane that can cruise at 2 times the speed of sound. It will only take 2.5 hours to reach Gotham City from the fog capital. That will be the arrangement. Prepare some cooked food and wine on the plane, Rinpoche said. He looked at the people who hadn't finished eating and didn't want to wait any longer. He clapped his hands and said, "Everyone, get ready to set off." After he finished speaking, he looked at the Empress. "You make the arrangements," the Empress said faintly. "All right, Excellent, Sir Tai, and Sir Wu, I will have to trouble the 3 of you to capture someone alive. The target is attending the banquet. Create a disturbance outside, and then capture the target. Try not to be discovered. Someone will lead the way and bring you to meet up with us later. I'm familiar with this matter. Don't worry, Your Highness." Tai Yin and Wu Cheng laughed. They were officials of the Department of Inspection, and their job was to kill and capture people. "Minister Qin, Sir Lian, and Sir Yuan, I will have to trouble the 3 of you to capture the Prime Minister. Don't worry, Qin Chuan patted his chest and guaranteed. Your Majesty, let's go meet the Queen. Rinpochian said. The Queen. The Empress snorted. Night. In a manor on the outskirts of Fog City. The manor covered an area of more than 10 acres. Outside the manor was a forest, and inside the manor was a cement road leading to a fountain with gardens on both sides. Behind the fountain was a 3-story building that was brightly lit. Even outside the manor, one could hear the music coming from it. 2 cars stopped in the distance. A young man in casual clothes opened the door and said to the people behind him, "This is as far as we can go. What are you going to do next?" Taiyin looked around with a relaxed smile on his fierce face. This matter couldn't be simpler. Wu Cheng, kill them from the main gate. General Exum, block the back door. That kid, bring me in to capture the target. The young man was a little stunned. Wasn't he supposed to try not to be discovered? Except for the target, leave no one alive. Dead people don't leak information. Taiyin laughed with a cold expression. Hiss. The young man took a deep breath. He didn't know how many high-ranking officials and tycoons were inside. Kill all of these people. The young man didn't dare to bring them in and quickly said, "Wait a moment." After that, he quickly contacted the ambassador and explained the situation. Liang Cheng was also shocked. This group of people was really cruel by nature. In comparison, Rinpochian was simply a kind person. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 11:15. So is not actually a title, but a general term for a title. Usually, people who had made great contributions to the empire or had outstanding positions in their respective fields could obtain it. Sir Mason was one of them. As a member of the House of Commons and an important figure in the Independent Party, Sir Mason actually had great influence in many industries, especially as one of the core figures of the Rising Hawk faction in recent years. He had close personal relationships with many military personnel. This banquet was also a private gathering of the Hawks who had recently been suppressed by various parties, including many people from the Conservative Party, Liberal Party, and Independent Party. At this time, Sir Mason was talking to several men with a smile on his face. From time to time, he would look up at the current Minister of Defense, Baron Arateline, or raise his glass to toast with a man from a distance. At the same time, he could perfectly follow up the conversation next to him. It's a pity for Jeremy and Ferdinand. No matter what, they're doing it for the glory of the Empire. Sir Mason nodded lightly. Jeremy and Ferdinand were both important members of the party. Although they were now in prison, they still had a chance to come out. After all, these 2 knights had also made great contributions to the country. As for those 2 people, as long as they were alive, then the glory of the empire where the sun never sets would not exist. Who could imagine that such a powerful country would bow down to 2 people? And it was after they had caused so much damage to the country. Just as Sir Mason was thinking about this, he suddenly heard something coming from outside. It seemed to be someone's cry. Just as he thought about this, he seemed to hear another cry, a little clearer than the previous one. Without needing him to arrange for someone to go out, someone immediately went out to check. However, as soon as the person walked out, he let out a scream and fell forward. His head rolled off and blood spurted out. A woman standing not far from the door suddenly let out a shrill scream, breaking the silence in the hall. A strong man wearing a wide-sleeved robe that seemed to be worn in the ancient Eastern country a few centuries ago strode in with a cruel and ferocious smile on his face. He waved the long knife in his hand, and the woman's scream stopped abruptly. Blood spurted into the air. A dash! Guards! Where are the bodyguards? Catch him! Guns are loud. The hall suddenly became chaotic. Those who were close to the hall ran toward the inside. That kid, see which one is it? I think these guys all look the same. Taiyin turned around and looked behind him. A man wearing a mask stuck his head out to take a look and suddenly exclaimed, "Be careful." A few men in suits pulled out pistols from their pockets. Attack! Dead or alive? Sir Mason shouted. If anything happened to these people in his manor, no matter how strong he was, he would not be able to bear the consequences. Bang! Bang! The hall glowed with the light of muzzles. The steel blade in Taiyin's hand spun and blocked the bullets. Then he grinned. These guys shouldn't be the targets, and neither should those women. In a flash, he appeared in front of the two bodyguards. With a flash of cold light in his hands, the two bodyguards were immediately cut off from their chests. Blood sprayed everywhere. After a few more flashes, there were a few more corpses on the ground. The hall was filled with screams. Many of the gentlemen who had been maintaining their poise, all this while revealed fearful gazes. Most of them broke into a run. Only a few of them could barely support themselves and stand in front of the ladies. However, Taiyan's figure disappeared in an instant. It was as if the air had exploded in the hall. The people who ran to the other rooms and upstairs were all turned into corpses. When Taiyan returned to his original spot, everyone was cowering in fear. Around them were mutilated corpses. There were no injured people or complete corpses. Who the hell are you? A Chinese? What do you want? What do you want? Someone shouted with a trembling voice. Everyone looked at the tall and muscular Chinese man with fear. Everyone wanted to know what he wanted to do. However, he had killed more than 10 people without giving them a chance to speak since he came in. However, to Taiyan's ears, it was like a bird's language. Hurry up, point out the target for me. See if he's still alive. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll accidentally kill him. Taiyan had a hideous smile on his face. Blood flowed slowly under his feet. Bang! Suddenly, there was a gunshot. A man was holding a short pistol in his hand. There was a bullet embedded in Taiyan's back. As he moved slightly, the bullet fell to the ground. Only his clothes were a little damaged and the skin under his clothes was a little red. Taiyan pondered. Did someone hit him again just now? Then, with a hideous smile on his face, he flashed through the crowd and grabbed the head of the man who fired the gun. No! The masked man exclaimed. However, at the same time, Taiyan's head was instantly crushed like tofu. What did you say? Taiyan looked up. He's the Minister of Defense. The target this time, the masked man was trembling all over. This was no longer just cruel and fierce. This was simply a god of death. Taiyan was slightly stunned. His eyes were filled with ferocity, and his face was cruel and sinister. Why didn't you say so earlier? I said, the masked young man wanted to cry. I can't say it as fast as you kill. Taiyan frowned and looked down. He was thinking that the target had been crushed to death by him. He was afraid that he would be beaten. On the other hand, he felt bitter, lamented his bad luck, and hoped that Her Majesty would be gentler. The long saber in his hand turned into a ray of cold light. Since the target was dead, the rest should be killed as well. A young man and a young woman were shivering in the grass. In the distance, a woman in full armor flicked her finger, and the blood dripping from her fingertip pierced a hole in the soil like a sharp arrow. At her feet were two corpses with a big hole in their chests and their hearts crushed. After doing all this, Exangel looked at her fingers and saw that there was no trace of blood. Then, she pushed up her glasses and looked in another direction. Two little bugs. Your Majesty, there's no need to kill our way in. He looked at the guards in red uniforms in front of Buckingham Palace and pulled the Empress's arm. Oh, let's go by air. He pointed upward. There was a square in front of Buckingham Palace. If they killed the guards, the pedestrians and plainclothes in the square would definitely find out. They had to move stealthily to avoid alerting others. Carrying Run Bachien, she moved and appeared 100 meters in the air. She moved as if she was walking and could cross more than 100 meters in one step. In almost a breath's time, they landed on the roof and found that this building was actually in the shape of a circle. In the middle was a garden, and there were 2 rows of buildings at the back and on both sides. It should be there. Ren Bachien pointed to one of the balconies. A strong wind blew, and they were already on the balcony when they stopped. Ren Bachien turned his head to look down and saw that the guards below didn't notice anything. He then pushed open the balcony door and entered. Who is it? A woman exclaimed. Come. There were 2 women in the room. One of them was in her 30s and was wearing pajamas. She was sitting at a desk and reading something. The other one looked like a bodyguard. Just as she was about to call for help, Ren Bachien stepped forward and pinched her face. If you don't want your master to die too quickly, be quiet. Ren Bachien felt that he was a good person who was so kind to the enemy's bodyguards. Who are you? What do you want? It was unknown when the woman in pajamas had a pistol in her hand and was pointing it at the Empress. There's actually a pistol in the Queen's bedroom? Ren Baqian turned his head and looked at her with great interest. She was in her 30s, had brown hair tied up at the back of her head, and had black eyes. Her looks were passable, and her face was a little big. It had to be said that the appearance of the royal family of the Rising Sun Empire was rather average. It was already a compliment to say that she was pretty. The Queen only saw a figure flash in front of her, and the pistol in her hand had already disappeared without a trace. The Empress grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up, carefully sizing her up. Is this the Queen? She can't be compared to you. You're making things too difficult for her. Ren Baqian felt that the bodyguard in his hand was troublesome. She had already kicked him a few times, once on his crotch and once on his throat. She even wanted to use her legs to wrap around his arms and neck to break them. The Queen was already in his hands, yet she still dared to resist? She was really courageous. In order to save trouble, Ren Baqian knocked the back of her head. For what he saw on TV, a knock here could knock someone unconscious. As for whether it was true or not, he wasn't sure. In any case, the person in his hand had softened. Whether there would be any sequelae or whether she would become a vegetable, Ren Baqian had no idea. Your Majesty, please let go. I think she is about to die. We are not here to kill. Ren Baqian looked at the struggling Queen. Then what are we here to do? The Empress asked coldly. She loosened her hand, and the Queen immediately fell to the ground, clutching her neck and gasping for breath. What we are here for depends on their performance and answers. Ren Baqian carried 2 chairs, one for himself and one for the Empress. Then, he calmly asked, Do you know who we are? Who are you? The Queen looked up and asked in a panic, Don't you want to think about it? Do you need me to remind you? If I do, the price will be very high. Ren Baqian looked amiable. The Queen carefully looked at their faces. The Empress's red clothes, Ren Baqian's bald head, and that high reflectivity. Her pupils suddenly shrank, and she looked incredulous. It's you. You are still alive. Do you wish for us to die? Ren Baqian's smile became even more amiable. No, that's not what I meant. That's what you meant. Not only did you think about it, but you also did it. Ren Baqian bent down and moved his face closer. Then, he was kicked aside by the Empress. Ren Baqian jumped up from the ground. His nose was not his nose, and his eyes were not his eyes. You kicked me again? Why are you so close? Ren Baqian grimaced for a long time before muttering. Love is tolerance. Love is patience. Love is tolerance. Love is full of hope. Beating is affection, and scolding is love, the Empress suddenly said. Ren Baqian took a deep breath and asked, Which bastard said that? The Empress raised her eyebrows and said, You said it before. That's right. Ren Baqian said decisively. The Queen sat on the ground and looked at the jealous couple with a look of panic and bewilderment. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 11:16. The Queen panicked when she recognized the 2 men. Even the army couldn't do anything to them. They survived the explosion at an altitude of 10,000 meters and didn't seem to be injured at all. She couldn't think of anyone in this world who could hurt them. She only knew one thing. If these 2 want to kill her, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Furthermore, the guards wouldn't be able to save her. He could even kill him in front of everyone and swagger his way out. Under such circumstances, she was in a state of panic and despair. The only thing that gave her hope was that they didn't do it. We didn't do it. It was the United States, the Queen said. She was really scared and felt wronged. She felt that she had suffered an undeserved disaster. I was on your plane and was blown up in your territory. You're telling me that you didn't do it? Ren Baqian sneered. I'm telling the truth. The Queen felt that she had been wronged. If she didn't want to maintain her identity, she would have burst into tears. Ever since she was young, she felt like crying when she was wronged. After all, she was just an ordinary person in her 30s. She was well protected and didn't have much experience. It was only because of the death of her brother that she inherited the throne as the first in line for 2 years. Although the Empire of the Sun Never Sets was a constitutional monarchy, the king and queen were more symbolic than practical. To put it bluntly, they were just nobles. Under such circumstances, she wasn't much better than an ordinary person. She couldn't compare to the prime minister who had negotiated peace with Rinpoche. He was the real elite of the country. She hoped that Qin Chuan wouldn't accidentally slap the prime minister to death. Rinpoche wondered if he should contact Qin Chuan again. However, after calculating the time, they should be done with their work. Actually, I feel quite wronged. Who did I offend? I should have stayed at home obediently. You arrested my people. When I got off the plane, I would have to face your guns. When I flew home, I was bombed, Rinpoche said faintly. He felt that he was more wronged than the queen in front of him. The problem is that we didn't do it. The United States sent people to do it. 2 knights were involved and have been arrested. I hate those who collude with the Americans as much as you do, the queen said anxiously. What did she say? The Empress turned her head and looked at Rinpoche. From the beginning to the end, she had no idea what the other party was talking about. The only miniature earphone that could translate was hanging on Rinpoche's ear. Rinpoche briefly explained. The Empress looked at Rinpoche coldly. I said they did it. Rinpoche shrugged his shoulders. He knew that the Empress was furious. Since the day of the explosion, she had been suppressing her anger. She was like a porcupine, full of killing intent. He had not killed anyone yet, which meant that he had restrained himself. If he were to hold it in for another day, he would probably erupt like a volcano. The communication device on Rinpoche's hand vibrated. He opened it and saw that it was a man wearing a mask. Sir, we are near Buckingham Palace with the Prime Minister. How do we get in? Let them take the Prime Minister to the rooftop. Don't be seen by the guards. Then, when you see an open balcony, come in from there. After a while, a few people walked in from the balcony. Lien Liang threw the person in his hand to the ground, turned around, and smashed the balcony door with his mace. Rinpoche raised his eyebrows. Be quiet, we are sneaking in. Rinpoche raised his eyebrows. He then looked down at the Prime Minister, who was lying on the ground, and asked, Is he alive? Qin Chuan used the tip of his foot to flip him over. He was alive when we caught him. If he is dead, he was the one who killed him. He even pointed at Lien Liang as he spoke. Lien Liang was stunned. He didn't expect Qin Chuan to betray him so quickly. Seeing that the Empress was looking at him, he said, He's alive. If you don't believe me, I will step on him. Forget it. Rinpoche waved his hand. If he stepped on him, he would be dead. Could you not treat human life like grass? He had to do this meticulous work himself. He stretched out his hand to test the Prime Minister. He was still breathing and was very much alive. He gave Lien Liang an admiring look. Then he was slapped in the face. He woke up and spat out a few teeth. Footsteps could be heard from the corridor. Rinpoche stretched out his hand to get everyone to be quiet. He pinched the Prime Minister's neck with one hand to ensure that he couldn't make a sound. Your Majesty, what happened? The guard's voice came from outside the door. The Prime Minister's body twitched. After he woke up, he didn't look at his surroundings and didn't know where he was. At this moment, hearing the Queen's voice made him understand the situation. Nothing. I accidentally broke something. The Queen took the initiative and said. After she finished speaking, she looked at the people in the room with a worried look. She knew that the guard couldn't save her. Are you really okay? You can leave now. Rinpoche only released the Prime Minister's neck after hearing the footsteps getting further away. Mr. Prime Minister, we meet again. Hearing this voice, Harold Belfort raised his head with a look of astonishment. Previously, he had guessed that these Easterners were related to Rinpoche and thought that they were here for revenge. He didn't expect Rinpoche to be sitting here safe and sound. Joy flashed in Harold Belfort's eyes. If the other party was here for revenge, he would really be in danger. Although this matter had nothing to do with him, he could tell from their actions that they were a bunch of powerless people who didn't care about human lives. Furthermore, they were extremely powerful. Even if he didn't do it, they might not let him off. Now that Rinpoche was still alive and looked safe and sound, he felt that his chances of survival were much higher. With a change of heart, he knew what had happened. He first looked at the Queen and confirmed that she was fine. Then, he immediately said to Rinpoche, We didn't do it. We didn't do it. It was done by the Americans. A few people colluded with them and have been arrested. We can hand them over to you. Do you think that you can shirk all responsibility just like that? Ren Bachin sneered. Indeed, we didn't do it. Even if you kill us, you won't be able to take revenge. Instead, you will make those people behind the scenes happy. Harold Belfort had a bitter look on his face. Who would have thought that, as the prime minister of a powerful country, he would have such a day? What's he talking about? The Empress asked. He's telling me about the saying overseas, pain to your friends, delight to your enemies. Rinpoche motioned for the prime minister to go to the queen's side. After he helped her up, he said, "Do you think you can shirk all responsibility just like that?" Sensing the change in his tone, Harold Belfort glanced at the queen and asked, "What other requests do you have? There are more people who colluded with the United States than those arrested, right?" Harold Belfort hesitated for a while before saying, "There are still a few members of parliament. In addition, the Minister of National Defense is also close to the United States. These things may have been instigated by him, but I don't have any evidence." "We don't need evidence to kill." Rinpoche then changed his tone. "However, it seems that your Minister of National Defense is dead. But are there really only these few people? Who else in the military is involved? There are a few others, all under the Minister of National Defense. Hand these people over to me along with their families," Rinpoche said coldly. Harold Belfort said, "Although I'm the Prime Minister, I can't do whatever I want. Don't we still have the Queen? If the two of you can't do whatever you want, what's the use of keeping you? In order to save your lives, you have to pay a price. I don't care what you do. I just want to see the results." Rinpoche chuckled. Harold Belfort and the Queen looked at each other and saw the fear in her eyes. He then sighed and said, "I agree, but I need some time. Send them to China within 5 days. Also, don't let me know that there are still people involved who are still at large. That's definitely not the outcome you want to see. I understand. In addition, double the amount of equipment you asked for. Add the number of scientists and 100 people. I don't care if you kidnap them or use other methods. It doesn't matter, even if they aren't from the empire of the unsetting sun. In any case, you have to hand them over to me," Rinpoche said. It was much easier for a country to do this than for him. Harold Belfort almost jumped up when he heard the first half of the sentence, but he was relieved when he heard the second half. This was a solution. "Remember, I want scientists. Don't just fill the numbers." Seeing that the other party had agreed, Rinpoche didn't make things difficult for them anymore. If he was given more time, he could still cut a piece of meat. However, he and the others would be leaving soon, and the conditions were about right, so he didn't say anything more. The Empress looked up at Rinpoche. Although she couldn't understand what he was saying, she could understand his words and knew that he wasn't going to kill these two people. This made her even more unhappy. As if reading her mind, Rinpoche patted the back of her hand and said, "Go to the United States in a while. When you get there, you will have the opportunity to make your move." The Queen and Harold Belfort had a strange expression on their faces. They were a little happy and a little happy. They were happy that the two of them had survived. They were happy that the United States, which almost got them killed, was going to be in big trouble. It was easy to imagine what would happen when such a group of murderers went there. After all, the United States was the one behind this incident. They would never let the people from the United States off. No matter how they fought, the two of them would feel happy. After waiting for half an hour, Rinpoche received news that Tai Yin and the others had arrived near Buckingham Palace. Rinpoche asked them to wait outside before he got up from his chair. "The two of you will wait here for 3 hours. Don't give me trouble. If you give me trouble, I'll give you trouble," Rinpoche said to the two of them. Seeing them nod, he said to the Empress, "Let's go to the United States." Just like how they came, they disappeared from the balcony without a sound. Harold Belfort and the Queen felt their strength depleted. Their bodies were sore and weak, and they couldn't stand steadily against the wall. They had survived at last. The Queen's eyes turned red, and tears started to fall. She had never encountered such a crisis in her life. She was really frightened just now. This group of people was too cruel. Chapter 11:17. Gotham City. As the plane slowly landed, a group of 6 bear-like, burly men and 3 graceful women stepped out, attracting the attention of countless people. They were too strong. Even for the United States, which was generally tall and big, these men were too muscular. A few blonde and blue-eyed women couldn't help but feel their throats go dry. Strong men always exuded hormones all the time. "Stop! What are you guys carrying?" 2 uniformed white men stopped the group of people. Their gazes first swept across the Empress and the 2 Empresses a few times with a strange look in their eyes. Following which, they looked at Qin Chuan, Tai Yin, and the things wrapped in cloth behind them. "The 3 of you come over and check first." One of the men pointed at the Empress and the 2 women with a strange smile on his face. It was a little playful and somewhat greedy. Regardless of whether they were Chinese or not, most of them were easy to bully. Although there were female security guards, he had no intention of calling them over. He wanted to check them personally with his hands. However, the next second, a big hand grabbed the top of his head and squeezed. His skull, fresh blood, and brain matter immediately exploded. Although his words were incomprehensible to others, his expression and gaze made it so that everyone could understand. The people who saw this scene were stunned at first, followed by screams, and frantically ran in all directions. The other security guard saw this scene and immediately went limp on the ground. His eyes followed the big hand to his master, who was wearing sportswear and had a beard. He had a ferocious and cruel look on his face as he looked down at the security guard. He didn't look like he was looking at a person, but rather a bug. "Save!" The white man only managed to shout one word before his body slid to the ground. His chest caved in, and blood mixed with fragments of internal organs spurted out from his mouth and nose. The crowd didn't care about the 2 corpses on the ground. A few security guards rushed out from nearby, aimed at them, and opened fire. Lien Liang appeared in front of the security guards and swung his mace, which was wrapped in black cloth, at them. When the bodies flew out, they were all deformed. Yuan Sha punched a hole in the wall in front of him, and a few of them came out in a single file. Ren Baqian turned around and waved his hand. A man wearing a mask walked past the 2 corpses, paused for a moment, and then quickly followed him. "Stay close from me, lest you get killed by stray bullets." Ren Baqian's voice wasn't loud, but it made the man shiver. 2 batches of airport security guards rushed out, but in the blink of an eye, they became a pile of broken limbs. After that, no one dared to rush over. If they rushed up, they would die. The guns of the security guards were no threat to these people. Who would dare to rush up? After all, it was just a job. As for the passengers, those that they met along the way had already run away. However, there were a few who were so scared that their legs turned to jelly and they couldn't move. Ren Baqian and the rest couldn't be bothered with them. They went all the way out of the airport. It had to be said that the police here reacted very quickly. There were already police waiting outside. There were 5 police cars and more than 10 police officers hiding behind them, pointing their guns at the crowd. Fire! The police outside must have known what was going on inside. Without any intention of persuading them to surrender, they opened fire directly. In the distance, a helicopter flew over, its searchlight shining on the broken wall. "Lin Xiaola." He gestured in the direction of the helicopter. Lin Xiaola yawned and stretched. "Where are the candies? I'll give them to you when we get back." This fellow was so mischievous. Without candies, chocolates, or desserts, she didn't even want to move. If Ren Baqian didn't call out to her, she would probably lie there and sleep until the end of time. "I don't even have a reward, and I still have to fight to the death." Lin Xiaola was immediately unhappy. "It's the death of others. Hurry up. The machine gun is quite powerful, and it won't be good if my clothes are damaged." Ren Baqian really wanted to kick her. "Wait until I reach the spirit will level." According to his progress, he would reach the Earth embryo level in 2 years, which was the peak of the Earth wheel level. After a few more years, he would be able to break through the sky gate. After that, he would reach the spirit wheel level. He reckoned that Lin Xiaola wouldn't even be an adult then. There might come a day when he would beat her up. He would really hang her up and beat her up. The masked man behind him was called Feng Shuo. He had stayed in the United States for a long time and was also their guide this time. He was stunned when he heard the conversation between the two of them. These people really didn't feel nervous at all. One had to know that this was the United States. Although its gross domestic product had been surpassed by China, it was still the most advanced country in the world in terms of technology. These people were actually so unscrupulous in such a country and didn't feel the slightest bit nervous. No, this couldn't be considered unscrupulous anymore, but rather crazy. I don't know if I can go back alive. Feng Shuo thought to himself. He wasn't afraid of death, but he had to see how he would die. It was really unsettling to be with such a group of lunatics. Just as he was thinking about this, gunshots rang out incessantly. Tai Yin stomped his feet, sending gravel flying in all directions. He crossed a distance of 100 meters and crashed into a police car, immediately sending the police car and the two people behind it flying. He was just one person, but it felt as if a heavy truck had crashed into him. To put it more vividly, he was Optimus Prime before his transformation. The long saber in his hand shone coldly in the darkness, and the police cars and the police officers hiding behind were all cut into pieces. This is F1A26. This is F1A26. We have locked onto the target and are ready to attack. Please give the order, the pilot on the helicopter said to the image floating in the air. On the image was a man in a police uniform. Just as he was about to give the order, he suddenly had a shocked expression. Be careful. What? Before the pilot could react, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He turned his head and saw a person lying beside him. An Asian girl was looking inside curiously. Seeing him look over, the young lady grinned foolishly, reminding him of a certain species, huskies. The girl's fingernails that were several centimeters long popped out of her fingers. Different from ordinary people's fingernails, the girl's fingernails were concave inwards into a corner, making them even sharper, like the sharp claws of a feline. She drew a circle on the helicopter's outer shell. The titanium alloy shell was like a piece of paper under these sharp claws. With a push and a pull, the girl dragged the terrified pilot down from the helicopter and flung him to the side. A blood-curdling scream was heard from near to far, and it went silent in less than 2 seconds. Lin Xiaola could still hear the sound of the body falling to the ground. After that, she looked left and right, then pounced into the open cabin door. The machine gunner who had just pulled out his pistol did not even have time to aim before he pulled it out while holding onto his bleeding neck. A moment later, Lin Xiaola pounced into the darkness, and the helicopters from before were still flying according to their original route. In less than 2 minutes, there were no living people on the 3 helicopters. Only the smell of blood was still spreading in the cabin, and the helicopters without pilots continued flying according to their original route. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 11:18. Feng Shuo watched as Tai Yin turned the police car and the police officer and a pork on the chopping board, as if he was chopping melons and vegetables. He watched as the girl in the tube-top short skirt plunged into the darkness. After that, the 3 helicopters flew past as if they didn't see them. His heart was filled with shock. However, he still remembered what he was here for. He swallowed his saliva and asked, "Are we going to the Hua residence next?" According to the original plan, everyone planned to go there. However, the flight route was only to Gotham City. Originally, he was going to come out normally and then take a car to Hua Manor. He didn't expect everyone to kill their way out of the airport, no matter what was in front of them. He knew that they were powerful and cruel, but he didn't expect them to be this cruel. Now, even he was a little flustered. With such a huge ruckus here, it would be difficult to hide his whereabouts, let alone go to the Hua residence. Let's go to Manhattan and find a place to rest. I'm a little tired. Rest? Feng Shuo was stunned for a moment before a strange expression appeared on his face. After causing such a huge ruckus here, I'm afraid we'll be intercepted before we get far. They'll probably send out the army. Feng Shuo didn't know much. Even though he had seen everyone's battle prowess, he didn't think they could face the army. This was Citibank's territory, one of the world's economic centers. Even if they escaped the annihilation of the army, They would be quickly found when they reached Manhattan. Perhaps they could cause some casualties to the army and cause some damage to Manhattan, but that was all. After that, they would be captured or killed. After that, he would hide and think of a way to head to the Hua residence. These people might have a chance to be beheaded. Why don't we follow the original plan and go to Hua Manor? Rinpoche thought for a while and patted Feng Shua's shoulder. Manhattan, lead the way. It was actually quite safe in Manhattan. As the most prosperous district in Gotham City, the United States would not allow them to destroy the place, nor would they dare to drop a nuclear bomb there. They could only send out their army. However, the army in the city posed little threat to Cardinal Heaven experts. This was especially true for high-rise buildings and complicated terrains. Unless they wanted to turn the place into ruins, Tai Yin and the rest could attack as they pleased. In the movie, Manhattan was destroyed countless times, but in real life, it was definitely unbearable for America to fight a war there. After all, the president was just a spokesperson. It could be Ao Hei Zi or Baldy Chong. Rinpoche was prepared to fight the United States first. After that, he and Empress would launch a surprise attack on the Hua residence. With the Empress's speed, it would only take her half an hour to cover 300 kilometers. The other party definitely wouldn't be able to react in time, unless the President of the United States ran away and went into hiding while they were still in Manhattan. However, a monk could run away, but the temple could not run away. Other than the White House, there was still the Pentagon. This time, Rinpoche was determined to wreak havoc. This is the Pentagon. Connect me to the president. What happened? The current president of Citigroup was called Norman Bird. He had short silver hair and looked to be in his 50s. He was wearing a blue shirt with his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. It seemed like he had not rested yet. Mr. President, I have a piece of news for you. The magician and the woman are not dead, an old man in a suit said. Magician was his code name in the United States. Back in the military base, he was empty-handed, but he always had a spear or a metal chain with him when he fought. Mr. Minister of Defense, are you joking with me? Norman was shocked. How could humans survive such an explosion? Furthermore, satellites had already searched the area and found no signs of life. They had also repeatedly compared the satellite images. After the plane exploded, there was absolutely no intact human body that fell. It was impossible for them to be alive. I also hope that this is a joke, but unfortunately, it's the truth. We are in trouble. Mr. President. Norman's face turned extremely ugly. They were actually still alive after such an explosion, which happened 10,000 meters above the ground. Where are they? The Minister of Defense was livid. John F. Kennedy Airport. They just killed 2 security officers, 17 airport security guards, 22 police officers, and 3 helicopter pilots at John F. Kennedy Airport. They don't have the slightest intention to hide their whereabouts. Their intention is very clear, to kill and destroy. Norman's face changed a few times, and cold sweat began to drip from his forehead. Those 2 people were here for revenge. They were too crazy. The disaster at John F. Kennedy Airport would definitely shock the entire country. However, he couldn't care less at this time. Based on the abilities displayed by the other party, what happened at John F. Kennedy Airport was probably a small matter. As if reading Norman's thoughts, the old man added with an ugly expression, "They aren't just 2 people. They formed an Avengers alliance, and there are a total of 10 of them." Norman slowly sat in his chair, took a deep breath, and asked, "Is there any good news, Mr. Minister of Defense?" "No, there's only worse news." Norman felt that if he could, he would like to change the Minister of Defense. Talking to this old man was really troublesome. What's worse? Norman covered his forehead. They have already started moving north. Where is their destination? It's likely to be a bustling area. Our troops will be restrained there, but they don't need to care about that. The old man had the same opinion. It had to be said that those who could sit in this position were all outstanding people. However, the lack of intelligence and the wrong perception of power made them make the wrong choice. If they knew more, they would probably make the same choice. Some things had to be tried to be known. Norman gritted his teeth and said, We must stop them and not let them enter densely populated areas. If they really entered densely populated areas, he would be finished. He was very clear about this. The other party definitely wasn't here for a vacation. After saying this, he sat in his chair and panted a few times. He felt as if his chest was being pressed by a huge rock. The news brought by the Minister of Defense was really shocking. The 11th Division of the Army and the 3rd Regiment of the Mechanical Army have already set up a defense nearby. Helicopters are attacking first to delay the other party. Due to time constraints, their defensive area is already close to densely populated areas and is likely to accidentally injure people. In addition, I hope to mobilize the Air Force and Special Forces to coordinate the attack. Okay, Norman responded. The Ministry of Defense was very fast and had already done so before he was notified. This was already beyond his authority, but he didn't care at all. All he could think about now was whether such power could stop the other party. The conclusion seemed a little pessimistic. Gather all the staff. This is a war, and we must win, Newman said solemnly to the Minister of Defense. I'll head to the Pentagon right away. We will do our best, Mr. President. The Minister of Defense didn't say that they would win in the end. His opinion was the same as Norman's. After understanding the outcome of the attack by the Empire of the Unsetting Sun and the explosion, he wondered if the other party would be killed. Norman opened his mouth and really wanted to say, "Is there still a possibility for us to negotiate?" However, he didn't say it out loud. He was starting to regret it now. He regretted his previous actions. Judging from the outcome, the previous action had brought them huge trouble. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 11:19. Let's get out. Rinpoche pulled the Empress's hand and got out of the taxi. He was starting to hate these driverless taxis. In the past, no one would dare to stop here. Even if they were threatened with knives and guns, they wouldn't dare to leave everyone here. I reckon they stopped these cars, Feng Shuo said as he got out of the car behind. There are no cars coming from behind. They seem to have been stopped. Rinpoche nodded. He understood this. Under the moonlight and street lights, he could see flying motorcycles flying in the direction of the airport. Flying motorcycles were usually used by the police because they could move quickly in the city, weren't affected by traffic, and were easy to take off and land. On the contrary, the military rarely used them. After all, they could only carry a small number of people, fly a short distance, and most importantly, they were a target in the sky. Without cars, everyone moved very fast, even faster than the cars. When they passed by a viaduct, a beam of light fell on them from the sky. For helicopters were divided into two directions. They were 500 meters horizontally from the viaduct and more than 100 meters above ground. It was difficult for Lin Xiaola to reach this distance. Fire snakes began to spit out from beside the searchlights. Countless bullets intersected to form a bullet net that enveloped everyone. Tai Yin and Wu Cheng brandished their steel sabers and blocked the bullets from both sides. The sound of clanking rang out incessantly. The Empress's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's side. She slapped the side of the helicopter with her jade-like palms, and the helicopter spun like a top. Both helicopters faced the crowd sideways. The Empress took a step in the air and appeared at the tail of the second helicopter. She put her hands on the helicopter and twisted it, causing it to spin continuously in the air. Then, the third helicopter, the fourth helicopter. When the Empress returned to her original position, the sound of heavy steel hitting the ground could be heard. Tai Yin glanced at his own steel blade. The snow-white blade was now covered with craters, causing him to feel pain. This saber was his wife's dowry. It could be used as a family heirloom. For the rest of the journey, Tai Yin kept sighing. Rinpoche couldn't help but say, "I will give you 10 sabers when we get back. Don't be so distressed. My saber is made of gold and steel." Tai Yin's eyes lit up. "In that case, you should look for Her Majesty." Rinpoche almost spat in his face. "In order to serve Your Majesty, I won't even frown even if I have to go bankrupt." Tai Yin immediately chuckled, fully displaying the simplicity and honesty of a mountain person. Rinpoche immediately chuckled. This bunch of old bastards looked like they had thick eyebrows and big eyes, but none of them were good people. They're moving too fast. Based on their current speed, they'll reach the area where the original defense line was set up in 5 minutes. Only the 3rd Mechanical Regiment can set up the defense in time. The 11th Army Division won't be able to reach the designated location in time. The Pentagon was brightly lit at this time. Countless people in the offices were busy, and a tense atmosphere spread in the Pentagon. 0-inch, how much longer until the 11th Division arrives? The vanguard needs at least 10 minutes. They're too slow. Get someone to think of a way to stall them. The 3rd Mech Regiment still has 6 flying snake helicopters, but it's hard to hold them back with just 1 helicopter. Helicopters and the soldiers of the 3rd Mechanical Regiment. We must stop them outside the line of defense. Doesn't the Gotham City Police Station have flying motorcycles? Could they hold them back? We only need 5 minutes to stall them until the vanguard of the 11th Division arrives to set up the defense line. They've already arrived at the airport and won't be able to return in time. Activate the space-based weapons. Lock onto our defensive area. The target has appeared. Position is 2,000 meters ahead. Get ready to attack. Position is 1,300 meters ahead. Snipers, open fire. One by one, the voices quickly issued orders. At this time, Rinpoche and the others could advance about 100 meters per second, which was equivalent to a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour. The Empress suddenly stretched out her hand in front of Rinpoche, and a jet-black bullet fell into her hand. The snipers in the distance couldn't believe their eyes when they saw the scene through the scope. At the same time, Lien Liang carried Feng Shuo and moved slightly to the side. Taiyan's sword flashed. Gunshots were heard in the distance after they finished their actions. Then, tongues of fire were spat out in the darkness. Hundreds of soldiers wrapped in kinetic skeletons formed a dense crossfire that engulfed everyone. These mechanical soldiers were stronger, carried more ammunition, and didn't need to worry about the recoil of the firearms. Their firepower was several times greater than that of ordinary soldiers. 2 mechanical soldiers could match the firepower of a squad of ordinary soldiers. Needless to say, due to the support system, the accuracy and reaction speed of the mechanical soldiers weren't comparable to ordinary soldiers. In the air, dozens of small missiles were fired from both sides of the helicopters. The Empress grabbed Rinpoche and moved as if she were taking a stroll in the air. However, her speed was so fast that the eyes couldn't keep up with her as she pounced toward the armed helicopters in the sky. She swatted one of the helicopters down with a single palm strike. Lin Xiaolo was originally behind everyone. She squatted down slightly, and her entire body melted into the darkness like a fish in the water. She was completely untraceable. A moment later, a few screams came from the rear of the mechanical army. Lin Xiaolo had a husky-like smile on her face. Her hands turned into claws and brushed past the bodies of the soldiers like a breeze. A rain of blood and minced meat were set off. Lin Xiaolo flashed through the crowd and squinted her eyes. She enjoyed the feeling of hunting in the dark. This was an instinct that came from her blood. I'll let you guys see how sharp my blade is. Qin Chuan laughed wildly and leaped into the air. The long blade in his hand, which weighed 175 kilograms, drew an arc in the air. The air was torn apart as if it was a piece of cloth, and the blade landed heavily on the mechanical army. The ground seemed to shake. A blade mark appeared on the ground more than 10 meters in front of Qin Chuan. Regardless of whether it was the limbs or the firearms, they were all pushed to the sides. Then, the blade swept across and slashed at the waist. The defensive line formed by hundreds of soldiers equipped with the most advanced mechanical skeletons was instantly broken without any resistance. It's over. In the Pentagon, a staff officer who was looking at the screen turned pale, and the documents in his hands fell to the ground silently. At this moment, he could only see flashes of snow-white light in the crowd, followed by broken limbs and splatters of blood. A sea of blood was set off in the crowd. The originally noisy command room instantly fell into an indescribable silence after Lin Xiaola and Qin Xuan broke through the defensive line. One by one, they looked at the images floating in the air with a pale face. It was hard to believe that the strongest army in the world, the mechanical army that they were most proud of, could not resist against 10 enemies. Looking at the other figures killing their way into the defensive line on both sides, a staff officer shouted with a pale face, "Retreat! Let them retreat." In fact, there was no need for him to shout. Everyone knew that they had to retreat and form a new defensive line. Fighting with these enemies at such a close distance was suicide, not a battle. However, everything happened too fast. It was so fast that no one could react. In a breath's time, a few killing gods broke through the defensive line. In another breath's time, there were only mutilated corpses left in the middle of the defensive line, and some soldiers who were still alive and struggling on the ground. In the third breath's time, the blade light had already killed its way into the defensive line on both sides. They didn't even have the chance to escape. And the sixth armed helicopter in the air also crashed down at a speed faster than when it rose into the air. The defense minister closed his eyes. As expected, they lost. What was more chilling was the speed of their defeat. It was useless even if the 11th Army Corps arrived. Such firepower couldn't cause any trouble to the enemies. Didn't anyone get hurt from such a powerful firepower net? Someone couldn't help but mumble. Who are they? What are they? Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1120. I would like to personally thank some of the friends who have tipped today. Among them, there are 5 branch masters: Playboy, Kagaya, Azuma, Diver Lu, Tachibana already decided, and Zixin Yuchen. The other 10 people in the top 15, Kaka, Happy Wings, it's hard to think of a name, No Coincidence, Little Kagawa Chuckle, World of Ladders, that's all, Eternity 38, Small. Slave, Zucalin. There are still many readers behind me, but I can only see the top 15 on the webpage. I really can't take it anymore today, so I won't be scrolling through my phone. I would like to say thank you to all the friends who have supported me. I'm going to sleep. The pretty boy at the Empress's house would like to thank all the readers who have supported me. Currently typing, please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1121. In just 2 to 3 minutes, hundreds of soldiers equipped with the most advanced exoskeletons were reduced to a pile of broken limbs. Blood flowed like rivers and seas, and flesh and blood were everywhere. The Empress threw a few armed helicopters to the ground and landed with Renbachian in her hand. These conventional weapons were like children to the Empress. An Empress had the bearing of an Empress. She didn't need to do anything in a small-scale battle like this. Qin Xuan and the others could easily destroy these weapons. However, the Empress had been suppressing her anger. She was actually injured by an ordinary person in this world. If she hadn't reacted quickly, Renbachian would have died without a doubt. Even though the Empress had been suppressing her anger, she was still in a rage. The Empress wanted to vent her anger, but killing the culprit wasn't the end of it. How could one person's death be enough? She wanted to destroy everything that the other party had. It was just like how some people like to smash things when they quarreled. The Empress was the same, but she liked to smash other people's things. After landing from the sky, the Empress's expression didn't ease, but became even colder. Qin Xuan and the others waved their weapons to get rid of the flesh and blood stuck to them. Except for Lian Liang, the huge mace in his hand was stained with pieces of flesh that needed to be carefully cleaned. However, he didn't care. In his opinion, the mace covered in flesh and blood was more intimidating and could better serve as a foil for his bravery. Where should we go next? The Empress looked at Feng Shuo and said, "Show us the way." Feng Shuo, who was stunned by everyone's destructive power, immediately quivered when he was glanced at by this cold and murderous gaze. He subconsciously asked, "Where are we going?" "Manhattan," he replied. "Oh, I got it. Let's go forward first." Feng Shuo looked distracted. A United States mecha regiment was destroyed, just like that? Just as the Empress was about to move forward, she suddenly looked up at the sky. What's up there? In this night, even with the moonlight, one couldn't see very far, let alone the sky. After recovering from the shock, everyone in the battle command became frantic. Countless staff officers were busy analyzing the enemy's strength and formulating new battle plans. Minister, the satellites are in place, and the 86 laser cannons have finished charging. Should we attack? A man with a general rank asked in a deep voice. The defense minister fell silent for a moment. He had originally planned to use space-based weapons to attack while the mechanical army was entangled with the enemy, catching the enemy off guard and killing them as much as possible. However, the enemy was advancing too quickly, and the mechanical army was also failing too quickly. The space-based weapons had only finished charging at this time, and the threat of using space-based weapons alone was not great. The biggest problem with space-based weapons was that the position of each laser cannon was slightly different. Therefore, the angle of the satellite had to be slightly adjusted after each laser beam was fired. At the same time, they had to calculate the influence of the environment and the atmosphere on the refraction of the laser beam. All of this would take at least a minute. In outer space, a deviation of 1 millimeter would cause the attack to miss by at least a few hundred meters. The enemy was not a wooden dummy. With his speed, he would only be able to attack once. The Minister of Defense hesitated whether to attack now or to give up this opportunity. If they didn't stop them, the enemy would go straight into the densely populated areas, and with the combat strength they had displayed, the destruction they would cause would be completely unbearable. However, the attack could only hit one person. Even if one person was killed, the rest would retaliate crazily. The most important thing was that the enemy was in the heart of their side. He raised his head and looked at the few figures on screen. His gaze landed on the bald man and the woman in red whose bodies seemed to be glowing. From the information he had received, the bald man's identity was very special, and the woman in red was the strongest. What are the chances of killing target number 1? The defense minister asked in a deep voice. No one can hide from light. According to calculations, there is a 90% chance of killing target number 1. Everyone, after today, we may become the sinners of the entire country, the defense minister said in a deep voice. The command center instantly quieted down. The enemy is very strong, just like the superheroes in Marvel and DC comics. The pressure they bring us is unprecedented. However, this is not a reason to let them do whatever they want on our territory. Even if it will incur crazy retaliation, even if it will cause us to be condemned in the future, no matter what the reason is, surrounding the territory of the United States is the duty of us soldiers. Attack target number 1. Yes, sir. Everyone replied in unison. The defense minister sat in his seat with a serious expression. In reality, he was not as fearless as he appeared to be. To put it bluntly, he was more of a politician than a soldier. If he had a choice, he would definitely persuade the president to give up on that plan. However, he did not have a choice. He had a feeling that no matter what happened in the end, he was going to be in big trouble. Angle in position. SWK-01. Launch. As a beam of light shot into the sky from a certain corner of the United States, everyone saw the woman in red suddenly raise her head and look up. What is she looking at? Everyone instantly felt as if the other party had discovered them and was looking at them through a satellite. She noticed. This thought only appeared in everyone's mind when a beam of light shot down from the sky and hit the woman in red. Target hit. She actually dodged it? How is that possible? There's no way someone can dodge light. She noticed it. She moved when the beam of light rebounded, but she's too fast. Everyone in the command center had pale faces. She even dodged light? Even at the moment when the beam was refracted, she noticed it? She didn't completely dodge it. Her arm is injured. An injured beast was even scarier. So is the Empress. A few seconds ago, the Empress suddenly felt a huge threat coming from the sky. Then, a beam of light fell on the spot where the Empress had just been standing. There weren't any lighting effects, and there wasn't much of a technological feel to it. It was as if someone had suddenly turned on a laser light and shone it in this direction. There was a 10-centimeter diameter mark on the ground that was almost completely melted. Rinpoche even smelled the smell of barbecued meat. Then, there was a wanton and ostentatious killing intent. Even though it wasn't directed at everyone present, it landed squarely on them as if countless sharp blades were slashing across their bodies. The clothes of Qin Xuan and the others were already slightly damaged, and at this moment, tiny holes silently appeared on them. Feng Shuo was the most miserable. He couldn't help but groan as he felt as if countless knives were slashing his body. "Your Majesty!" Rinpoche was also shocked. He grabbed the Empress's arm and took a closer look. There was a charcoal-like area from the elbow down, giving off the smell of burnt barbecued meat. "This is a laser cannon." Rinpoche felt his heart ache even though the Empress's arm was injured. "It's all thanks to your Majesty's quick reaction. I want them to die," the Empress said through gritted teeth. There was nothing wrong with using any means in a battle between two armies. The Empress originally didn't want them to live, but she was even more furious now. Lin Shaola swallowed her saliva as if she was drooling. Thump! The Empress appeared where Lin Shaola was, but Lin Shaola was nowhere to be seen. Rinpoche felt that it was a light punishment for her to take a beating. Even Erhua was smarter than you. Set a small target first, such as 1 second. Remember, booksellers. Chapter 1122. TSK. This is Gotham City, Rinpoche and the others exclaimed as they moved quickly in the shadows. A few decades ago, when Rinpoche was still a student and had just started working, Citigroup was the world's most powerful country. Gotham City was one of the world's economic centers, and it was still the case even now. If you love someone, send him to Gotham City, because it was a paradise where you could enjoy yourself to the fullest. If you hated someone, send him to Gotham because it was hell and experience the misery of the slums. Rinpoche remembered someone saying something like this before, but he didn't know who said it. However, this statement showed the importance of this place in many people's hearts. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, to be honest, the cleanliness of this city couldn't be compared to many small cities in China. From time to time, trash cans could be seen on the ground, as if they had just been rummaged through. Patches could be seen everywhere on the ground, as well as broken road teeth. All of this told him that this city wasn't what many people imagined it to be. There were indeed a lot of tall buildings, and the distance between them was extremely small. If one wanted to bask in the sun, they would have to wait until noon. However, this environment made it difficult for satellites to aim at them. Along the way, they didn't encounter any obstructions. They probably knew that they couldn't stop them, so they had other ideas. They had settled down, but the Empress wasn't. Every time she took a step, her strength would travel from the soles of her feet to the ground and spread out. It was like a stone smashing into the water, creating circles of ripples. The result was the same as what happened in Fog City. It was like an earth dragon rolling under the ground, waking up countless people. Rest for a while and herd the goats tomorrow. Rinpoche comforted the Empress. This was his plan before he came. The Empress was like an angry hedgehog that could explode at any moment. Rinpoche could only comfort her with a few words. Her goats? Qin Xuan and the others were puzzled. They didn't dare to talk to the furious Empress, but it wasn't a problem to ask Rinpoche. Just like herding 4 corn cows. Rinpoche rolled his eyes. After all, there were only a few of them. Even though they were experts, could they kill everyone in a city with a population of more than 10 million? Furthermore, Rinpoche wasn't prepared to cause such a large massacre. He wanted to cause a scene for revenge. However, there was no need to slaughter the civilians. Just let them go free, just like those ranches' flocks of sheep needed to be herded. Along with a few shepherd dogs, Qin Xuan and his group were shepherd dogs. Driving half of New York's citizens to wherever they wanted like sheep was actually quite a thrilling thing to think about. Actually, everyone didn't really need a rest. Putting the others aside, Rinpoche could go 2 or 3 days without any problems if he needed to. However, Waking up the entire city in the middle of the night and torturing the people of Gotham City was not a very ethical thing to do. In addition, too many people were sleeping. If they were to fight now, there would be too many casualties. Rinpoche had always firmly believed that he was a pretty good person. Other than himself, he had never seen anyone who was so considerate of the enemy. On his way to Manhattan, he could see many helicopters leaving in a hurry from the rooftops. Many rich people probably ran away after getting the news. After all, Citibank belonged to the rich. These rich people were naturally the first to receive the news. Of course, they were the wealthiest. Now the president and his cabinet are still struggling to tell the people of New York to evacuate, which would obviously cause chaos. In particular, if a country couldn't protect its own people under the hands of 10 people, one could imagine what would happen to them. However, if they didn't inform the people to evacuate, there would obviously be more serious consequences. No matter what, this president and his cabinet wouldn't have a good ending. Let's find a place first, Rinpoche instructed. After Rinpoche instructed, Feng Shui took the opportunity to lead everyone to a high-rise area in the Upper East District. This is the gathering place of the rich in Gotham City. Many of those rich people on Wall Street have mansions here. The Citibank government definitely wouldn't dare to cause any trouble here. Feng Shui said to Rinpoche. Rinpoche smiled and didn't say much. Even a cornered dog would jump over a wall, let alone a country's government. Under normal circumstances, the Citibank naturally wouldn't dare to cause any trouble here. However, compared to the destruction of Gotham City, this place was nothing. They randomly found a building in the middle of the building, tore down the door, and knocked out the owner. Rinpoche went to the bar and found a few bottles of wine. He poured a glass for the Empress and threw 2 bottles to Qin Chuan and the rest. Take a rest and wait for tomorrow morning. TSK, it's not that good. It's not as good as your wine. Qin Chuan took a sip and smacked his lips. The wine that Rinpoche brewed during the gamble with the Zhang family was really memorable for a few days. Unfortunately, Rinpoche didn't brew any more after that. Of course, even if he did, it wouldn't be his turn. With the Empress's alcohol tolerance, a few tons of wine a year was only enough for her to drink. The Zhang family brewed another batch of wine. I will process it later and share some with you. Rinpoche shook his head slightly. He didn't think much about wine and mostly drank with the Empress. He contacted Yang's son from the Messier 87 department. It was early in the morning here, which was afternoon in China. The timing was just right. Mr. Ren, you have created a big commotion. Yangsen couldn't help but exclaim after the call. Rinpoche and the others were in Gotham City, and countless people in China were paying attention. The previous battle was practically a live broadcast. Many of those who were tempted to cause trouble were now well-behaved. They really couldn't afford to offend them. Fortunately, that person from above suppressed them. Otherwise, Rinpoche would have dealt with them when he returned. Is there anything I can help with? Yangsen asked. Of course, the nation definitely wouldn't get involved on the surface and would even pretend that they didn't know anything. I'm suddenly blind, and you guys can do whatever you want. Make a few pieces of armor, weapons, and food, Rinpoche said. Although there were only 10 people, the amount of food consumed in a day was definitely not a small amount. It was easily more than 5,000 kilograms. With such a large amount of food, even if they could obtain it through various means, a lot of it would definitely be done by others. As a country, they had the ability to do so. I don't want compressed food, Rinpoche said first and then told him the quantity. I will help you contact them and try to arrange it, but it may not meet your requirements. After all, this isn't in China. Now that the matter has become so big, countless people are watching you, and it's very difficult for us to do it. Yangsen was a little embarrassed, but he still agreed. As for the weapons and armor, are they cold weapons? Yangsen guessed. In the battle, just now, those people wielded knives like meat grinders. They probably wouldn't be interested in ordinary firearms. Of course, the weight doesn't matter as long as it can protect the vital parts and doesn't affect the movement of the joints. I want the best metal that can at least withstand the laser for a short period of time. Rinpoche felt that although the power of the laser wasn't small, the attack frequency was its biggest weakness. As long as there was armor that could withstand it for a short period of time, it wouldn't pose too much of a threat. He then asked Qin Xuan and the others about their requirements and reported the measurements and requirements. It needs to be sent to the Maple Leaf Kingdom first before being transported to the United States. It will probably be delivered to you in 36 hours. They didn't rest until dawn. First, a hypnotic gas appeared out of nowhere, causing Qin Xuan and the others to yawn several times. Then, a missile streaked across the darkness of dawn and burst into flames in the night. The Americans are crazy. Feng Shuo, who was dragged to the ground and woken up by a bottle of water, broke out in a cold sweat. This was the Upper East Side of Manhattan, the gathering place of the rich in Gotham City. The Americans even blew themselves up. They would be crazy if they didn't do anything. Ren Baqian smiled. He was already prepared for this. He then stretched his back and said, I originally wanted to give them some time, but since they are so impatient, let's start herding the sheep. Into the cell phone. Miam no advertising allowed 81 Zongwengxi Shouwei. Chapter 1123. Feng Shuo thought the Americans were crazy. The U.S. Secretary of Defense also felt like he was going crazy. They were afraid to take action, but they had no choice but to do so. This was the true portrayal of their current situation. Manhattan, the economic and cultural center of Citigroup, where most of the world's top 500 companies were headquartered, was also home to the largest number of wealthy people in the country. Although some had left last night, this was only a small portion of the top tycoons. Most of the people were still here. Ren Baqian, the Empress, and the rest felt as if they were stabbing into the hearts of their enemies, causing them to be in so much pain that they wished they were dead. If a disaster were to happen here, the entire economy of Citibank would be hit hard. If it were another person or organization, the United States could still think of a way to resolve the situation and minimize their losses to an acceptable range. The Empress was different. She was a walking killing machine. The Americans knew that she could destroy a region or even a city by herself. She was an extremely terrifying force. It had powerful destructive power, superb speed, and an unbearable sense of danger. It was too difficult to kill such a person, especially when the person was in his heart. Even if they did everything they could to kill the other party, they would most likely end up half dead. This was no longer a case of sacrificing 800 to kill 1,000. In the eyes of some of the higher-ups of the United States Army, this was already a case of sacrificing 80,000 to kill 1,000. However, they didn't have a choice. They had to do something. No matter what they did, it couldn't be worse than what they were doing now. The hypnotic gas and missiles had all been used, but there was almost no effect. The other party actually didn't suffer any damage at all. This made the hearts of those who were waiting for the result go cold. In that case, all sorts of tricks were prepared to be used next. Before that, a few men in black suits appeared in his line of sight. Gentlemen, perhaps we can talk. Ren Baqian grinned. Such a familiar smell, such familiar words, and even the clothes were so familiar. They just bombed us with missiles, and now they're here to negotiate? Were you born the year of the dog? However, before Ren Baqian could open his mouth, Lien Liang had already appeared in front of them with an evil grin on his face. With a slap, only a few headless corpses were left. Towards their enemies, Qin Xuan, Lien Liang, and the rest never spoke any nonsense. Don't you have the slightest bit of respect for life? An image suddenly appeared in the air. It was one of their targets. Life? Reverence? Isn't it ridiculous? Why didn't you say anything when you cooperated with the Rising Sun City to set a trap? Why weren't you in awe when you blew up the plane? Now you're thinking of reverence. Ren Baqian felt like laughing. However, it was true that the Aboriginals did not have much reverence for life. To the Aboriginals who had been fighting ferocious beasts in the wilderness for thousands of years, that was a joke. They could even disregard their own lives at any time. So why would they care about the lives of others? We will meet again very soon. At that time, we will discuss this issue again. Ren Baqian flashed his white teeth at the other party and crushed the communication device on the ground. This thing is much more advanced than the telephone. Qin Chuan smacked his lips. The cars here were also much more advanced than those in Dayo. There were also advanced things like big screens on the streets. The few of them finally understood why the newly built imperial capital felt a little strange. It turned out that it was like this place. Your Majesty, do it, Ren Baqian said. You guys will start from the coastal area in the northeast. Feng Shual will lead the way. Ren Baqian said to Qin Chuan and the rest. Remember what I told you to be careful of. If you die here, it will be a joke. Even a fool wouldn't be bitten by an ant. Qin Chuan laughed. Before he could finish laughing, he was smashed into a building not far away. The Empress was the fool who got bitten by an ant. She was worse than a fool. Xinja, go too, Ren Baqian said. I don't need protection. Xinja looked at the Empress, took the bow from her back, and handed it to Ren Baqian along with the quiver. Then, she cupped her hands and left. Follow me. Wait a minute. Ren Baqian's expression suddenly changed. The Empress looked at him doubtfully. I seem to have forgotten something. Ren Baqian knocked his head as if he had forgotten something important. What exactly was it? Ren Baqian was deep in thought. The Empress glanced at the top of a building in the distance where someone was looking at her. Ren Baqian's expression changed as he looked at the place where the others had disappeared. Is someone missing? It seemed like she found a room to sleep after the phone call. When a missile exploded, everyone jumped down in advance. Why didn't anyone call for her? The main reason was that her presence was too low. All she did was sleep every day. Ren Baqian didn't remember her existence until now. The Empress looked at Ren Baqian, then looked at the half-destroyed building and the survivors who were running out of it. After thinking about it carefully, someone was indeed missing. I'll go and look for her. Ren Baqian moved closer in a flash, stepped on the outer wall, and jumped onto it. However, it was easier to find a foothold in such a ruined building than an ordinary building. According to his memory, all 5 floors were in ruins. 2 of the floors had turned into big holes, and the original room was nowhere to be seen. According to the position, only a pile of broken concrete was left in the corner of the broken wall. It was very likely that Lin Xiaola was under this pile of concrete. Ren Baqian's heart tightened. He didn't know if Lin Xiaola could survive under such circumstances. He moved away a few huge concrete slabs and shouted, Lin Xiaola, are you alive? I'm below. Her voice was a little weak, as if she was injured. Ren Baqian was glad that such a big explosion had turned several floors into ruins. It was lucky that Lin Xiaola wasn't dead. It would be too unjust for her to die here. After some time, he finally dug out Lin Xiaola, who was like a clay figurine. Ren Baqian was slightly stunned to see that the person in front of him wasn't the Lin Xiaola of the past. She had round ears on her head, and her face seemed to have grown a little. Most importantly, the clothes on her upper body were all torn to pieces, revealing her 2 trembling breasts. This was completely incomparable to her A** in the past. He had seen this body long ago. He had seen on a flatboard after her transformation and even tied her up. He had touched everything that shouldn't be touched, so there was nothing strange about it. What was strange was that she actually transformed. Back then, she transformed after eating the herdsman's jade-wasted slave and naturally transformed back after a period of time. Now, she actually transformed again in a crisis. Lin Xiaola didn't care about her exposure. She teared up after being dug out and said, My leg was crushed and broken. Serve you right for sleeping. Seeing that she wasn't dead, Ren Baqian began to resent her for failing to meet his expectations. You slept every day, and now you were blown up. Woo! Lin Xiaola's tears trickled down. She wiped her face, and it became even more disheveled. She felt wronged. Who would have thought that she would be blown up like this while sleeping? Ren Baqian cleared out a large piece of cement that was pressing down on her leg. There weren't many injuries on her upper body, but one of her legs was penetrated by a steel bar. The other leg was twisted and obviously fractured. Other than these 2 major injuries, there weren't any scratches. Lin Xiaola's skin was also very tough. The Empress landed silently behind Ren Baqian and sighed as she looked at the somewhat miserable Lin Xiaola, who was crying even more miserably. Did you bring medicine? Yes, but I have to wash her first. Ren Baqian carried the petite and almost naked Lin Xiaola on his shoulder. The Empress snorted and glanced at Lin Xiaola's hot body. Even the dust couldn't hide it. Chapter 1124. When he carried Lin Xiaola to an empty room to take a bath, she transformed back to her original size. After the bath, she was back to that girl with no breasts and no buttocks. After treating her wounds, he found some clothes for her to wear: denim shorts, a sports vest, and a t-shirt with a husky drawn on it. It was Lin Xiaola's best friend. In fact, she fell into a deep sleep after the bath, and Ren Baqian was the one who gave her the clothes. Transforming under such a huge threat consumed too much of her energy, and she needed to fall asleep to recover her strength. Not only did the team lose members, but she also became a burden. Ren Baqian had no choice but to tie her behind him. When he went down, it was already a mess outside. Fleeing people and vehicles were everywhere, like a nest of ants scattering in all directions. In the surroundings, 3 buildings had already collapsed, and a few buildings were full of cracks as if they would collapse at any time. The Empress, dressed in red, stood there like a reef in the middle of the waves. The chaotic crowd automatically parted when they got close to her. "Let's go." The Empress took a glance at Ren Baqian and casually threw the bow into his arms. Then, she got up and walked in another direction. There were several melted holes around her body, and they were the same as the marks caused by the laser beam that fell from the sky last night. In addition, there were also many long bullets on the ground. Following the Empress's footsteps, a 20 to 30-story building began to collapse in the opposite direction, smashing into the chaotic crowd from the middle. The collapsed concrete blocks crashed into the crowd, creating waves of blood. Cries and screams could be heard all around. Ren Baqian looked at the chaos around him and walked behind the Empress. It doesn't start from here. In the plan, he and the Empress would form one group, and the rest would form another. They would start from the 2 corners of Gotham City and destroy the crowd toward the Hua residence. It was just like herding sheep. These people could cause the greatest damage to the Hua residents. They were also their hostages. The Empress's footsteps landed heavily on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. She turned her head and looked at Ren Baqian with bloodshot eyes. "I want to destroy something. I want to bring destruction to my enemies. I want to make them tremble when they think of me. I want to make them feel fear when they see me. I want to make them not dare to look me in the face or call me by my name." There seemed to be a ball of flame in her voice. The Empress opened her arms as if she was embracing the world and then shattering it. Ren Baqian's heart skipped a beat as he looked at the Empress. Recently, the volcano that had been buried in her body had erupted. Was it because Lin Xiaola was injured? In other words, the repeated attacks on the Empress caused her anger to accumulate and accumulate. It was only when he dug Lin Xiaola out that her anger exploded. Furthermore, the traces left behind by the laser and sniper rifle around the Empress just now were undeniable. The American government had done a great job, causing the Empress's anger to completely erupt. At this moment, the Empress was in grave danger. It was even more dangerous than before. A woman who liked to smash things when she was angry, and she had the strength to massacre an entire city by herself. The combination of these two was simply world-destroying. Following the tremors and rumbles, another building began to topple and collapse, smashing into the crowd like a raging river. Ren Baqian noticed that these 2 buildings had collapsed in the direction of the crowd. In other words, the Empress had broken the load-bearing walls and pillars of these 2 buildings that were facing the crowd. "Start a massacre, Your Majesty." Looking at the chaos around him, Ren Baqian couldn't help but grab the Empress's wrist. "Are you trying to stop me?" The Empress turned her head, her eyes glowing red and full of ferocity. "I want to say that Your Majesty looks so beautiful now." Ren Baqian looked straight into her eyes and caressed her face with one hand. It felt like warm jade, soft and exquisite. The Empress paused for a moment, and the red glow in her eyes diminished a lot. "The person I love is an unparalleled emperor. There's no need to believe it." This is an unquestionable fact, Rinpoche said softly. The red glow in the Empress's eyes diminished a little, and her original black pupils began to show. I would like to ask for permission. I really can't help but kiss your majesty now. Rinpoche hugged the Empress's waist and smelled her fragrance. The red glow in the Empress's eyes diminished again. Rinpoche leaned forward slightly and kissed her. He felt the heart-stirring softness, licked her red lips, and shouted, "I will never let go of you in this lifetime." The Empress's eyes were completely restored to their original clarity. The Ministry of National Defense, who had been observing the two of them with satellites and surveillance cameras, as well as some people who were watching this scene through other channels, were dumbfounded. What was going on? Was this a public display of affection on the battlefield? Rinpoche was proud of himself. He was indeed the best. The Empress wouldn't behave like this in the past, even in battle. She would only behave like this when she was completely enraged. She was like a ferocious beast that was too dangerous. She was like a sharp blade that hurt others and herself. Then a bullet hit the Empress's head, deformed, bounced off, and a strand of her hair fell. In the blink of an eye, the Empress's eyes emitted a red glow. While bouncing off Rinpoche, a longbow and a bone arrow appeared in her hands. The air was torn like silk, and a white line appeared after it was torn. The sniper on the distant building exploded into a mist of blood. The building in front of them began to collapse, and a black shadow directly covered their heads. Damn it! Rinpoche was furious. He was using his ultimate move to reduce the Empress's anger, but the two of them were increasing the Empress's anger. Even the heavens wouldn't forgive them if they didn't die. Although he was angry, escaping was more important. He reached out to grab the Empress, but the Empress grabbed him by the collar and knocked him into the crowd. She knocked a bloody path out of the crowd. There is absolutely no need for the Empress to do this. She would never do this under normal circumstances. The Empress's favorite activity was to step on people's heads. However, at this moment, the Empress only wanted to tear everything in front of her to shreds. She brutally knocked through the crowd and past the collapsed building in front of her. The ground that she ran past was completely shattered, and her power unscrupulously penetrated through her feet to the surroundings without any restraint. Groups of people were blown to pieces as if a bomb had gone off in their bodies. Rinpoche was thrown to the ground 2 streets away by the Empress. It was as if his body had fallen apart. Just now, the Empress had knocked over at least 7 or 8 cars while carrying him. If he didn't have a meat shield, he reckoned that a few of his bones would have been broken. After getting up from the ground, Rinpoche hurriedly put down Lin Xiaola, who was on his back, and saw her spurting out small amounts of blood like a fountain. At this moment, she wasn't in a deep sleep, but had fainted. The Empress panted heavily. It wasn't because she was tired, but because the red color in her eyes was fluctuating, bright, and dark. Purple veins floated and dissipated on the surface of her body repeatedly. Rinpoche couldn't care less about the Empress. He quickly checked Lin Xiaola's physical condition and reckoned that she had at least a few broken bones. Chapter 1125. In the end, I was shocked by the explosion. Luckily, I'm on a higher floor. Anyway, there was no electricity. Everyone knows the rest. The female Empress Gigolo, the electric pole downstairs exploded. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1126. How is she? Rinpoche was standing in a room. The window in front of him was completely smashed. He was on the 4th floor, and he could see the flesh and blood all over the ground and the red figure in the distance. Beside him, a blonde lady in her 40s was examining Lin Xiaola. Her back is fractured in 3 places, and her lumbar vertebrae should be fractured. Was she hit by a car? The blonde lady suppressed her anger. She was giving first aid just now, but she was kidnapped by this Asian man and forced to treat this young girl first. Not only her, but her son, who was 7 or 8 years old, was also injured. Although she was furious, she didn't say anything for the sake of her son's safety. These Asians were far stronger than the Americans, but apart from videos, it was rare to see the truly powerful Asians in the United States. However, she didn't hide her anger at all. Is her life in danger? Rin Baqian turned his head and asked. Lin Xiaola wasn't hit by a car, but by someone else. However, the effect was more serious than being hit by a car. Even if she was hit by a car, she wouldn't be able to bear it. Previously, there was chaos everywhere, and the car wasn't as fast as her legs. At that time, the Empress's speed was faster than the speed of sound, and she could directly turn people into a rain of blood. You need to take her to the hospital, but not the hospital in Gotham City. Somewhere else. Gotham City is very dangerous now, and the president has issued a statement to evacuate the civilians temporarily. The blonde lady was a doctor after all, and she reminded Rinpochian. Unfortunately, she didn't expect that the crisis in Gotham City was brought about by this person in front of her. She didn't see what happened after she was kidnapped, but she was puzzled as to why the noise outside was so much lesser and even quieter. The position of her bones is not off, right? Rinpochian asked. No, the blonde lady replied. Well, I'll give you a suggestion. It's best to stay in the ruins. It's much safer than running around, Rinpochian said casually. Just now, this woman actually stopped to give first aid to a passerby in such a chaotic situation. He had to admit that she was a good person. The lady glared at him, held her son, and ran downstairs. However, as soon as she went out, her legs gave way, and she sat on the ground. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with fear. She saw countless broken corpses on the street outside. Not even a complete corpse could be seen. The wreckage covered the road. Previously, there had been countless civilians fleeing on this road, but now, those people had become corpses. It was as if a bomb had exploded from the inside, and the ground was covered in flesh and blood. Ugh! The woman quickly buried her son's face in her chest. She could no longer endure the turbulence in her body and directly vomited. Even if he was a doctor, the scene in front of him was too terrifying. It was like hell on earth. He took out some ointment from the pouch at his waist and applied it on Lin Xiaola. Her back was fractured in 3 places, and her hip bone was also fractured. Then, he fed her the medicine. He dipped his finger in her mouth and poured a few mouthfuls of water. Being sick for a long time made one a doctor. His movements of applying medicine and feeding medicine were very agile. At this level, he could at least be considered as half an orthopedic surgeon. He knew very well that even if he used medicine, it would take him 3 days to recover from this injury. Lin Xiaola's bloodline was special. She might be able to recover faster than him, but it would only be half a day faster. Fortunately, even though it would take 2.5 days for her to recover, she would be able to walk on her own in 1 day and move around in another 1.5 days. He tied Lin Xiaola behind him again and jumped out of the window. The street was like a sea of blood. Ren Baqian swept his gaze across and saw the golden-haired female doctor. However, her condition wasn't right. It was as if an invisible rope was strangling her neck, and she had difficulty breathing. Asthma. This thought flashed across Ren Baqian's mind. He saw the child in her arms fall to one side and in the same state as her. Both of them were also violently convulsing. Damn, it's poisonous gas. Ren Baqian immediately reacted. He was too familiar with this thing. It was colorless, odorless, and extremely difficult to detect. Even an earth wheel expert could only last 2 minutes longer than an ordinary person. If it weren't for the 2 ordinary people here, the situation would have been quite serious by the time he realized it. Ren Baqian held his breath. Even though he could also inhale it through his skin, the speed was much slower. He stomped his feet and turned into a shadow. After a few steps, he landed beside the Empress and grabbed her with one hand. Your Majesty, there's poisonous gas here. Let's go. The Empress had massacred an entire street. Her anger had dissipated a lot, and she was much more clear-headed now. She pulled Ren Baqian into the air and landed on the top of a building in the distance. Below them was a surging crowd of refugees. With them around, any poisonous gas could be detected in time. Ren Baqian tried to contact Feng Shuo, but no one answered after half a minute. Rinpoche knew that the other group was probably in a similar situation as him and had also encountered poisonous gas. Feng Shuo probably couldn't escape the fate of death, but the others should be able to react after discovering that he was poisoned. Rinpoche had instructed them on the road and when he was resting yesterday. Besides some weapons that he knew, it also included poisonous gas. After all, this thing couldn't be avoided. Don't be in a hurry to kill people. Rinpoche saw that the Empress was about to make a move. He reached out to hold her hand and intertwined his fingers. The President of the United States has just issued a wartime order to mobilize the people of Gotham City to leave, Rinpoche said. The streets are full of people now. When they gather together, we can drive them away from the rear. Rinpoche pressed on his communication device and played the video of the president's speech. Rinpoche took a few glances and laughed. They don't dare to not mobilize the people of the city. Both sides fought in Gotham City, causing countless deaths and injuries. Now that the people of the city are moving, we will follow them and turn the United States upside down like a wildfire spreading. They can't do anything even if they know. They just have to be careful not to fall for their tricks. Unless they drop nuclear bombs on their own land and on their own people. Otherwise, they can only watch helplessly. The Empress stood at the edge of the rooftop and looked down at the crowd. Her eyes were still flickering with a dark red color, and it seemed like she wanted to go down and kill again. Rinpoche's gaze was also changing as he stood behind the Empress. He was prepared to set off a reign of terror in the United States, but he wasn't prepared to let the high-ranking officials off either. However, he hadn't considered whether to start a massacre or a massacre. Given the density of the crowd below and the Empress's indiscriminate attacks within a radius of a few hundred meters, it wasn't impossible to kill hundreds of thousands of people. Previously, the Empress had killed at least thousands of people on the streets, including Qin Chuan and the others, who didn't know the current situation. It was estimated to be tens of thousands. It was completely possible for a few people to kill hundreds of thousands of people. The denser the crowd, the greater the damage. Then what? What would be the reaction if they really killed hundreds of thousands of civilians? What would be the reaction of the other countries, not the United States? At present, he and the Empress were like the demon kings of this world. He didn't want to kill too many people and end up killing himself. Your Majesty, there's no hurry. Rinpoche held the Empress's hand and interlocked their fingers. Tens of millions of people want to leave Gotham City, and they won't be able to do so in a short period of time. After speaking, Rinpoche looked up at the sky. He wasn't sure if it was because he was afraid of provoking the Empress to kill the civilians below, or because he already knew that the Empress had sharp senses and that the lasers couldn't hurt them, but they stood on the rooftop for a while and didn't attack. However, there were many helicopters, flying cars, and flying motorcycles hovering in the sky in the distance. What are you waiting for? The Empress turned to look at him, and the red light in her eyes dimmed. Rinpoche glanced at her and saw that her eyes were red. They weren't bloodshot like other people's eyes. Instead, they seeped out of her pupils like a burning flame. It was extremely special, and he didn't know why. I reckon that this time, everyone will have a new understanding of our strength. After giving them time to accept it, Rinpoche rubbed his chin. It didn't take long for his mood to turn sour. Would his hair and beard grow out one day, and the bird's nest? Chapter 11:27. At this time, many people were watching an image of a woman in red. With a single step, everyone within a radius of hundreds of meters exploded, and the chaotic street instantly turned into a sea of blood. The smell of blood passed through the screen and made many people feel uneasy. As Rinpoche thought, the Empress's actions this time scared many people. Although she had previously destroyed an army in the Rising Sun City and destroyed countless buildings with her steps, she wasn't as unscrupulous as this time. She attacked indiscriminately. Under such an attack, any army would be powerless to resist. Even 100,000 elite soldiers would be destroyed in an instant in the face of such an enemy. The woman looked delicate and heroic. Her red clothes were like fresh blood, and she stood there looking fierce and awe-inspiring, making people shudder. It wasn't just her killing methods, but also her indifference to human life. It wasn't scary to have strength, as long as there were means and moral constraints. However, those who were strong but unrestrained were the most terrifying. In China, some people who were ready to make trouble were sweating profusely. If they really dared to make a move, they would probably follow in the footsteps of the U.S. Americans. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse to have such an existence, someone couldn't help but say. So what if it's a blessing? So what if it's a curse? Guns couldn't kill her, missiles couldn't blast her to death, and even poisonous gas was useless. With the speed she displayed, even the most destructive weapons couldn't hit her. She could be called invincible. In the future, we must be careful not to provoke her ferocious nature. The effect of poison gas on the Empress was unknown, but it had a certain effect on Earth Wheel and Spirit Wheel experts. It was just that their bodies were strong, so the effect was much slower. If there were ordinary people around, even if the poison gas was colorless and odorless, they would still be easily detected. It would be even easier if there were mice or some air detection devices on the body. Fortunately, we are only in contact with gate number 2. He grew up on Earth, so his ideas aren't much different from ordinary people. As long as no one provokes him, he won't cause trouble. Even so, who can guarantee that he will be like this in the future? If he has any ulterior motives, who can stop him? In the starry sky, individual strength is nothing, someone suddenly said. Everyone looked over in surprise. In the starry sky, humans were still based on Earth, so the sudden mention of the starry sky was certainly not a casual remark. Could it be that the research has been done? Someone asked with joy. We've made progress and calculated a point. As soon as these words came out, everyone's spirits shook, and they couldn't conceal the joy on their faces. Don't panic and pass quickly. If anyone tries to cause trouble at this time, kill them immediately. At an intersection, dozens of people in police uniforms were clearing the way for the fleeing crowd. There were natural disasters and people in the world. Ren Baqian and the others were actually terrorists, but it was a natural disaster for the Americans. Some people were of people. There were robberies, violent clashes, pushing and shoving, trampling, and even shooting in the crowd. The police were all on high alert. Idon of people of people. Idon. There are at least millions of people. I don't know. What are they? From time to time, the crowd could see light shadows floating in the air. From them, they could see a red-clothed woman moving forward. On her path, everyone within 100 meters of her exploded into flesh and blood. The buildings on both sides were collapsing and collapsing. This scene was taken from a tall building. Not long after, the image began to shake, and concrete could be seen falling down. Everyone who was 100 meters away from her exploded into flesh and blood, and the buildings on both sides were collapsing. There was more than one such scene. In fact, such videos were everywhere on the internet. Apart from a woman, there were also several burly men holding cold weapons and a bespectacled woman wearing metal armor and a battle skirt. In fact, such videos were everywhere on the internet. In addition to the woman, there were also several burly men with cold weapons and a bespectacled woman in metal armor and a battle skirt. Don't talk about that. If you don't want to cover the flag, hurry and clear the crowd. Someone shouted. A brown-haired woman in a police uniform suddenly saw something jump up from a distance. Be careful, they are coming. The policewoman was frightened and quickly raised her gun. Be careful, they are coming. The policewoman was frightened and quickly raised her gun. The others did the same. A woman in armor and battle skirt leaped dozens of meters into the air and crossed hundreds of meters toward the crowd. Without anyone's order, everyone opened fire. The sword in the woman's hand turned into a sword ray, deflected the bullets, and pounced directly in front of the crowd. There was no emotion in her eyes behind her glasses. With a flash of cold light, the heads of the 3 policemen at the front flew into the sky. Like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep, only a white policeman was left sitting paralyzed on the ground with yellow liquid flowing between his legs. He held the shotgun with both hands and pointed it at the other party, his hands trembling. Devil, devil, you are not a human, you are a devil. Ah, he cried as if he had a mental breakdown. Xin looked at him coldly and slashed the sword in her hand. The crowd, which was already chaotic, became even more chaotic when she arrived. There were cries and screams everywhere. No matter how cold and bloodthirsty one was, it was inevitable that they would feel compassion when they saw this scene. However, Xin didn't feel anything. She leaped onto a telephone pole not far away and looked into the distance. There was a viaduct in front of her, and there were troops setting up defenses on it. She pounced over like lightning, and the sword in her hand smashed into the line of defense of the troops like a sledgehammer. The entire viaduct was immediately broken, burying the troops below. Countless Americans were at a loss. Why was there such a person? Since there was such a person, why didn't superheroes appear? I'm hungry, the Empress said as she landed beside Rinpoche. The ground below had collapsed a few meters. Originally, there was a subway line below, and many people were hiding in it. However, at this moment, a section of the subway line and the stations along the way had completely collapsed. The Empress had killed countless people, and the ground below had turned into a sea of blood. However, there wasn't much of the smell of blood on her body, and she still had that alluring fragrance. When she said, "I'm hungry," although her voice was cold, Rinpoche could hear a hint of a young girl's coquettish tone. "I'll get someone to prepare." Rinpoche first contacted someone. There were people from China in Gotham City, and they were hiding underground. They even used all their connections to prepare some meat that was enough to feed 1,000 people. It was probably only enough to fill the stomachs of the Empress, Qin Xuan, and the rest. With this amount of food, ordinary people couldn't afford to feed them. "Let's go and find Minister Qin and the rest. Once we find them, we can start eating," Rinpoche said. Although Gotham City was huge, it only took 2 breaths to travel a kilometer under the Empress's feet. It wouldn't take much time to find them. After seeing them, Rinpoche looked disgusted. He saw that Qin Xuan and the rest were covered in flesh and blood, and the thick smell of blood was nauseating. Only Xin looked clean, but the smell of blood was extremely strong. The only thing that made him feel regretful was that Feng Shuo had indeed died from the poison gas. Now, each of them had a cat or a pet dog tied tightly around their waists. They were as pitiful as they could be. They used these little things to detect the poison gas in advance. When they arrived, it was a basement. There was a big metal door on the outside, and the area inside was huge. There were 6 Chinese people inside. When they saw them come in, they trembled with fear in their eyes. They already knew about what was happening outside through the internet. Even if they received orders, they would still feel fear when they saw these people. This wasn't a matter of killing a few people. They had seen many of such people, and they wouldn't feel anything. However, the people in front of them had killed tens of thousands of people with cold weapons. They weren't like nuclear bombs that could be detonated with the press of a button. Even the most courageous people would feel fear when they saw them. "Someone wants to talk to you." A bearded man threw a communication device over and retreated. He didn't dare to go near them. Fupin Chinese. Chapter 1128. Norman Board sat in the president's office with a pale face. After mobilizing the people of Gotham City to evacuate, he had been in the same position since he returned here. The biggest problem now was how to stop those people. If they couldn't be stopped, then they would find a way to negotiate. From the current situation, it was not impossible to negotiate. Although the goal was very tough, the United States was a country after all, and the other side had a precedent of negotiating with the Rising Sun City. It was just that the other side did not give them a chance to negotiate at all. They had to take the initiative to find this opportunity. Then what price would they have to pay? Thinking of this, Norman Board's face was bitter. He could be said to be the most incompetent president in the history of the United States. Even if this matter could be solved in the end, he would be finished. After a long silence, Norman Board sighed. Let's see what the consortium had to say first. He needed their support. He pressed a button on the table, and a middle-aged man walked into the room in a moment. Before he spoke, the communicator lit up. Seeing the name displayed on it, Norman Board immediately connected. Mr. Mellon, Mr. President, do you have a solution for the current situation? The other end of the communicator was a middle-aged man in his 50s. In fact, he was 10 years older than he looked. It's difficult for our soldiers to defeat them. We've tried, but we've failed without exception. It's not that the military is incompetent, but that the other side is too powerful. You must know this. We need to find a way to negotiate with the other side first. Even if we have to pay a price, then we can find a chance to retaliate. I'm trying to get in touch with them now. Mr. President, you're very clear-headed. You know what to do. But have you thought about what kind of price to pay? The price must be high, but we should be able to afford it, right? In fact, I wanted to contact you a minute ago. I need your support, Norman Board said slowly. He must get the support of the other side, and the other side must support him. Because this matter itself had the intentions of some consortia, many people were very interested in the two people themselves, hoping to study ways to make people stronger from them. Yes, we support you, but we hope to show more sincerity with a smaller price. Mellon smiled. This is difficult. No, it's not that difficult. Mellon's smile and words made Norman Board have a bad feeling. This time, someone has to sacrifice something. In their hearts, you are their enemy, the main culprit. Perhaps Mr. Minister of Defense as well. Norman Board's eyes widened and his body trembled slightly. There was disbelief in his eyes. Aren't you afraid that I'll tell others? I won't agree. I'm just following your request. You will agree. You still have family. They will live well. I told you, you're a very smart person. Besides, you have no choice. Norman Board instinctively looked up at the middle-aged man, standing not far away. The man, who had always been respectful to him, now seemed to have changed into a different person, his eyes cold. Renxia, do you know? Something big has happened in America. A young girl skipped to the side of a young man. The young man was very handsome, and the smile on his face was very gentle. I already know. Renxia smiled. His smile was as gentle as usual, like the sunlight, dazzling one's eyes. The girl's face was a little shy, but her attention quickly shifted elsewhere. With your status, you must have known about it long ago. Was the video real? My worldview has been shattered. Was that really a human? The young girl had a shocked expression on her face. She was obviously frightened by what was shown in the video. In fact, very few people in the country knew about this matter. After all, the domestic internet was very tightly controlled, especially regarding this matter. Any related comments and videos that appeared on the domestic internet would be deleted within seconds. Most of the people who knew about this matter were those who went to foreign websites when they had nothing to do, or those who were more well-informed. It should be true. I heard that the people of Gotham City have already been evacuated. This information is correct, Renxia said calmly. Of course, he knew that it was true. He even recognized the most powerful one among them and saw his uncle in it. He understood why his uncle was a henpecked husband. It was the same for anyone else. However, his aunt was really terrifying. Even though he already knew that she was a spirit wheel expert who surpassed low-level experts, he didn't expect her to be so terrifying. What was even more terrifying was that his aunt's expression didn't change much after killing so many people. She didn't hesitate at all and treated human lives as if they were worthless. He knew about the plane explosion and heard that the Americans were behind it, but he didn't expect his uncle and Annie to be so terrifying in the face of the second most powerful country in the world. They faced the entire country alone, and they were so fearless that the other party couldn't do anything to them. He doubted whether he could look them in the eye in the future. He also had other doubts. Who were the other people? Why hadn't he seen them before? Where did these peerless experts come from? How many of them were there? What exactly were the identities of his uncle and aunt? They made such a big deal out of this matter. How would things develop? Are they Chinese? Do you know who they are? Which department are they from? Can our martial arts reach their level? Renxia occasionally responded to the young girl's words while thinking about his own thoughts. He took the communication device, played with it for a while, and threw it aside. Since they weren't contacting him directly, they couldn't be the important people in the country. The most likely culprit was the Americans. The country didn't want to get involved at the moment, so they contacted him through this method. Even if it was someone from the country, they were the middlemen of the Americans. Since the important people in the country didn't contact him, it meant that the situation was still acceptable to them, and his operation could continue. After all, he was mainly here for revenge and to deter others. However, this didn't mean that he was ready to cut himself off from the world. It wasn't a big deal to fight with the Americans, but he still had to be cautious about the opinions of some people in the country. After all, the Empress wasn't invincible, and he had a lot of needs on Earth. Like a banquet, the food was served in bowls and could be removed after 2 minutes. After eating a little, Run Bachien began to browse the internet. At this time, the internet was in an uproar. The domestic internet was calm, but the foreign internet was like a typhoon passing through. Almost all of them were engulfed by what happened in the United States. There were all kinds of comments, including anger, doubt, sympathy, curiosity, and admiration. With such a powerful force, there were naturally people who yearned for it, but there were also people who labeled it as anti-human. The internet was in a foul mood. Fuping Chinese. Chapter 1129. In just half a day, the United States had already suffered huge losses. One had to know that the Empress had gone on a killing spree in Manhattan, where Wall Street and most of the world's top 500 companies were located. Almost everyone here was an elite from the Citibank and other industries. This was also the cornerstone of the country. It wasn't unacceptable to lose tens of thousands of people. However, the composition of the people made many people feel pain. Needless to say, the Empress's killing spree made many people afraid. The combat power she displayed could be said to be invincible. If she wanted someone's life, no one could stop her. In a situation where they couldn't defeat her, paying a certain price to make peace was the only option. However, Ren Bachien didn't even bother with their contact requests. As a last resort, some people had to urgently negotiate with the higher-ups of China. That afternoon, the casualties increased by tens of thousands. Now, the number of casualties had already exceeded 100,000. The number of casualties caused in just one day was enough to make the United States unable to recover for 10 years. Needless to say, the huge shock brought about by this incident had a similarly huge impact on the United States. That night, Ren Bachien received a call from China. Mr. Run. Yang Sen looked at the young man on the other end of the communication device with mixed feelings. It was hard to imagine that a few people could actually force such a powerful country to such a state. Even though he had been dealing with Ren Bachien for many years and had a fairly deep understanding of him, and number one, it was still hard to imagine. The President of the United States is dead. I haven't even gone to find trouble with him, but he's already dead. Don't tell me he died from fear. Ren Bachien was stunned for a moment before laughing. Although not, it's almost the same. The president committed suicide, which can be said to be an apology, with his death. Yang Sun sorted out his emotions. He knew that he couldn't escape. The power that you displayed is enough to prove that no matter where he is, he can't escape. Ren Bachien was silent for a while. Things definitely weren't that simple. So, Ren Bachien asked, regarding the attack on you, the president and the defense minister issued the order. Although the defense minister is still alive, as long as you want, you can decide his life or death. This also includes those who have been through it. Deciding the life or death of a powerful country's defense minister was already unimaginable for ordinary people. It was even hard to accept that the head of the country and the head of the military could be abandoned at any time. But, as Yang Sun said, if Ren Bachien and the Empress wanted to, they could kill anyone within a certain range. Is this an abandoned peace? I'm rather curious as to who talked to you. Ren Bachien had some guesses. Although he didn't pay much attention to Earth in recent years, he still knew a little about the United States. When he went to that world, the United States was already the most powerful country in the world. Its internal form was not a secret. I only know that DuPont and Mellon Consortium are involved. I don't know anything else. Yang Sun hesitated for a moment. What role did they play in this incident? Ren Bachin wondered. He wasn't sure what role these consortiums played in this incident, but he guessed that he might be playing some roles that weren't very good. City was the city of the consortium. Of course, it wasn't certain either. After all, no one knew that the Empress was so powerful before she revealed her incorruptibility. If the President of the United States wanted to deal with a few slightly stronger humans, he didn't need anyone else's opinion, especially since he had bombed their military base. However, he still felt that it was more likely that the consortium played a role in this. Do you think I would know about such a thing? Yang Sen asked. That's true. In any case, they want to talk peace. It can be said that you have forced the country to bow down to you. Even the president is dead. The Minister of Defense can be handed over, and the culprit has been punished. Not to mention the bloodshed in Gotham City. They will also make other compensations. Yang Sun didn't say it directly. His tone and demeanor were also discussing, but he still expressed some of the country's thoughts at this time. The culprit was already dead, and revenge had been taken. The whole world had been blown up, so it was about time to stop. After all, it couldn't go on forever. The culprit isn't necessarily the one who will be punished, Ren Bachin said faintly. What do you want? Yang Sun asked directly. I would like to know what benefits they gave you to contact me directly, Ren Bachin asked. You want to know what role those consortiums played, but they definitely wouldn't admit it. The insider was probably the unlucky president who was already dead. The Minister of Defense didn't need to know the specific situation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been handed over to Ren Bachin alive. As for the rest, the country definitely received some benefits from the U.S. Furthermore, these benefits could shut the mouths of many people, which was why Yang Sun said such a thing. At this time, Ren Bachin was reminding some people. After all, he was the one who was bombed, and he was the one who did it. You want me to stop after receiving benefits? How can it be such a good thing? It's up to me to decide when to stop. Yang Sen's gaze shifted as if he was looking at something. He then said, That gentleman wants to talk to you. Ren Bachin nodded slightly. He switched the call to another number. The person talking to Ren Bachin was one of the top figures in China. After talking for a while, Ren Bachin's face revealed a shocked expression. After talking for a while, they ended the call, and Ren Bachin fell into deep thought. The Empress wasn't nearby. Instead, she was stirring up a sea of blood in the distance. Ren Bachin put Lin Xiaola aside and stood on the edge of the 5th floor of a broken building. His eyes flickered incessantly. The news that he had just received was too important and too shocking. The Chinese Academy of Sciences discovered a curve in the universe that distorted the concepts of time and space. There were nodes on it, and one could reach other nodes through one node. The most important thing was that they had already calculated the location of one of the nodes. In other words, from the discovery of the curve and the node, mankind would enter the interstellar era. This discovery was enough to shock everyone. After all, entering the interstellar era meant that Earth had entered a brand new, vast, and filled with countless possibilities. To make a discovery in a short period of time and enter the interstellar era wasn't something that a country could do alone. It required the whole world to abandon disputes and participate in this together in order to achieve this. Not only did the U.S. suffer heavy losses under the hands of the Empress, but it also paid a huge price to establish contact with China. This allowed China to gain a lot and occupy an absolute leading position when the world entered the interstellar era in the future. Under such circumstances, the matter between Ren Bachin and the U.S. was something new. Furthermore, Ren Bachin would also benefit greatly from this. Not only would he receive a large amount of compensation from the U.S., but his and Ren Wanyan's industries would also be able to participate in certain aspects of the interstellar exploration. This benefit was too great. It was so great that Ren Bachin couldn't refuse it. Chapter 11:30. Father, why are you doing this? A young man rushed into the room and said angrily, Are you questioning me, Charles? The old man's voice was very calm, but it made the young man's forehead sweat. No, I just don't understand. The young man slowed down his voice. We are the Mellon family. We are one of the top 10 consortiums. We control everything in this country. While we admit defeat to a few people, our glory has been torn to pieces. Don't let arrogance blind your eyes. We have already lost. Since that is the case, we should not provoke such a powerful enemy. We should quietly lurk and wait for the opportunity to come. We'll take back everything. The old man's eyes were full of calmness. We didn't do our best. Although they are strong, we still have a chance. Especially the president. Why do we abandon him so easily? Even if we want to push him to that position, it is not an easy task. He can still do more things. He's their target. Even if we must abandon him, there are other ways to make them pay a heavy price. For example, let him hide in the military base and then detonate the military base. Is this your idea? The old man turned his gaze to him with inexplicable emotions in his eyes. The young man was stunned for a moment. His father was right. This was his idea, and it was one of the last choices. Before that, there were still many ways to try. No matter what, it should not be the current situation. Yes, they escaped the explosion on the plane last time. It was just that the power was not enough, and the range was not big enough. If the power is enough, I believe it can kill them. They are not invincible. They are not gods, nor are they demons. Even gods can be injured. The young man said his idea loudly. If the power was not enough, the equivalent would make up for it. As long as the power was enough, there was no one who could not be killed. How can you be sure that they will do what you think? Child, the old man asked. Their target, but they are not in a hurry to kill the target. You see, they are not in a hurry to find the culprit for revenge. They can slowly kill in Gotham City until they reach Washington Mansion. And to do so, our government, the people's trust in the government, and the people's sense of security will all collapse in this process. If that is the case, what should we do? Wealth, glory, these are all important. But a stable order and country are the prerequisite for all of this. Even we cannot avoid the chaos brought by destruction. Besides, it's not like we don't have enemies. A lot of people are happy to see us suffer a big loss. If the incident continued to ferment, someone might leak some information to them. Before those people make up their minds, we must eliminate the danger first. The young man was a loss for words, unable to think of a rebuttal. But the anger and hot blood that surged up did not subside in the slightest. Things should not have been like this. This should not have been the result. Moreover, they have a strong sense of danger, which allows them to escape from certain death many times. It can be seen from the use of space-based weapons that even light can't hit them. It was probably because of this that they were able to escape from the plane earlier. We don't have many methods to deal with them, and the ones that can threaten them are likely to be escaped by them. As the old man spoke, he pressed a button on the table, and an image appeared in the air. In the video, there was the current Minister of Defense, as well as several government and military officials. A total of 7 people were tied up. All 7 of them were in different states. Some of them had unconcealable fear on their faces and were trembling all over. Some were filled with anger and were shouting as if they had lost their minds. In front of them were a man and a woman. Seeing the woman in red, the young man's eyes flashed with amazement. The Empress's facial features were extremely beautiful even in the eyes of Caucasians. In particular, her heroic spirit and iceberg-like temperament, as well as her powerful strength, were extremely attractive to the Americans who advocated freedom and heroism. Strength and temperament were her best accessories. After the amazement, the young man shifted his gaze back to the people who were tied up and frowned. Why are they so unbearable? This shouldn't be. Of course, the old man smiled and was happy to explain. Their adrenaline secretion is relatively high, which makes them fearful, anxious, furious, agitated, and unable to stabilize their emotions. The young man thought about it and felt that there must be a reason for this. Then he said thoughtfully, "Is there a problem with the air? The other 2 aren't affected?" The old man clapped his hands to express his appreciation. "That's right, child. You're very smart. This is a small attempt. We have tried a few types of nerve gas before, and the results are the same. This doesn't mean that they are immune to this kind of attack, but it is enough to show that their physique has a stronger resistance that is 10 times stronger than ordinary people. This allows them to have a higher tolerance for mistakes when they are faced with danger. Then the old man said in a deep voice, "Extraordinary speed, powerful strength, strong physical fitness, and an extremely strong sense of danger. These are the things that they have that we look forward to. When they turn these into weapons, it is too dangerous for us. If we continue, it is very likely that we will be dragged into the abyss. This matter will temporarily stop here. Although our losses are not small, it is not unacceptable. On the other hand, if someone were to link up with them, the result would be unacceptable. Our family might even perish because of this. They may not be able to really destroy everyone in a country, but they have the ability to destroy a family," the old man concluded. "I understand, father." The young man pondered for a long time and finally let go of his worries. "I think I've learned a few things. No matter what kind of enemy you face, don't act rashly before figuring out everything. That is likely to bring destruction to yourself. I'm very happy that you think this way, but we can't be too restrained. After all, we are melon, and there are very few existences that can bring us danger. It is enough to maintain a certain degree of humility and caution." While the head of the melon family was teaching the children, Rinpoche looked at the few people in front of him who were bewildered because of fear and anger and felt rather bored. "These are the officials of the United States?" Rinpoche said sarcastically. It was hard to imagine that these people planned to attack him and the Empress. Of course, there was also the corpse of the president. In the face of life and death, these big shots were even worse than ordinary people. The Empress glanced at them and said, "They have been tampered with. Forget it, it doesn't matter." Rinpoche put away his expression and also felt that it was meaningless to say anything to these people in such a state. He slowly extended a spear from his palm. "Devil, devil, you are the devil," one of the officials said in horror and tried to shrink back. Unfortunately, he was tied to a chair, so his actions were meaningless. Rinpoche cut the throats of these people, turned his head to the side, and revealed a sinister smile. He pointed the spear in his hand, and the scene in front of the two people in the distance suddenly turned black. The Empress pondered for a while and asked, "Are there only these few people behind the scenes? There may be others. However, even if there are others, they are very well hidden. We don't have any information, so we can only stop here for the time being. We still have a lot of time, and there will be many opportunities in the future. As long as we know who else is hostile to us." Rinpoche turned his head to look at the Empress and felt that she was exceptionally beautiful these 2 days. He couldn't help but give her a hug. Immediately after, he felt a pain on his shoulder and saw the Empress pull out her finger. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Rinpoche looked baffled. This kind of pain was nothing, but the Empress's behavior puzzled him. The Empress gently put her blood-stained finger into her mouth, as if she was tasting something delicious. "When I was killing these 2 days, a question suddenly appeared in my mind. What is it? What does your blood taste like?" "It's very sweet." Rinpoche was shocked. "Did you become obsessed with killing people?" Chapter 11:31. Useless. Rinpoche wanted to scold her as he looked at her curled up on the sofa and slept until the end of time. This guy was really too useless. She was the only one who was seriously injured by an explosion and then hit by a car. In Rinpoche's eyes, she had already become the kind of person who couldn't be helped. She wasn't weak, but she wasn't reliable either. Especially when she was constantly in a state of craving for sleep, it could be said to be her greatest weakness. Perhaps she would only get better when she became an adult. Only God knew when she would become an adult, since she was already over 50 years old. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at the Empress, who was watching the movie attentively, and felt a little worried. The Empress didn't seem to have any problems at the moment, but as the person closest to her, he naturally noticed something wrong with her. Ever since she started killing, she seemed to have a craving for fresh blood. Whenever she was with him, she always wanted to bite him as if he was more attractive than dessert. Just like what she once said, his blood tastes sweet. Also, the way she looked at him reminded him of a song called Bloody Love Story. Furthermore, she had shown a preference for blood wine and blood cakes these 2 days. This wasn't a good sign. He didn't know if the killings had caused her to have some kind of bias or if it was a problem with her. Even the Empress herself wasn't sure. If this situation continued, Ren Baqian suspected that he would become a tyrant empress. Although she had a tendency to be a tyrant before, a bloodthirsty tyrant was obviously more serious. No matter how he thought about it, she was like a supervillain in an anime. After thinking about it, he threw these messy thoughts aside and decided to observe the Empress's condition first. Hopefully, she would gradually recover as time passed. "Your Highness, there's no more wine," Lian Liang shouted from a nearby room. Qin Chuan and the others were in that room and couldn't extricate themselves from the sea of wine. "Oh, I'll get someone to send it over," Ren Baqian called out after he came back to his senses. "There's one more thing." Lian Liang hesitated. "Speak. Is there a girl?" Lian Liang laughed and explained, "It's boring with just a few of us. We need a few singers and someone to accompany us to drink." Ren Baqian narrowed his eyes and glanced at them. All of them had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and none of them were good people. However, Qin Chuan and Tong Jinye had fought dozens of times at the top of a brothel. Both of them were experienced, and going to a brothel was like going home. The girls were pleasant to the ear, beautiful, and docile. But to say such words in front of the Empress, they were really not afraid of getting beaten up. "Forget it. I'll get someone to bring you there." Ren Baqian rubbed his forehead and decided to get someone to bring them to the club. There was a pretty good clubhouse in Wuji City. The ladies that were generally at the Manuel level had excellent looks, were highly educated, or were skilled in other areas, such as playing the piano. Although it was a clubhouse, the girls inside also relied on their own abilities to make a living. They sold their bodies, not their skills. They were different from the flirtatious sluts outside. After getting someone to take them away, the Empress acted as if she didn't see them and continued to immerse herself in the television series. He really wanted to say, women. Regardless of which world it was, or what identity it was, Ren Baqian waited for a while before seeing Ren Wanyan. Brother, sister-in-law. As one of the most famous tycoons in the world and the head of the most famous technology company, Ren Wanyan obediently sat there, sweating profusely. It was too stressful to sit near the Empress. After knowing what happened in the United States, not many people could look the Empress in the eye. Upon seeing this, Ren Baqian took him to another room for the afternoon, mainly to discuss the upcoming exploration of the universe. The higher-ups of China had great expectations for this exploration and were somewhat impatient. Ren Baqian could understand this. Who didn't want to see humans leave Earth in their lifetime? Moreover, some of the new elements, minerals, and even new plants might be discovered. Perhaps any of these could allow Earth's technology to break through the current limitations in a short period of time and embark on a faster path. The Academy of Sciences calculated that the node was between Mars and Jupiter. Within 3 months, a United States spacecraft on Mars would be transferred to the node, and China would also send 2 intelligent robots and some equipment to the spacecraft. At the same time, with China taking the lead, most of the developed countries in the world would work together to build 3 brand-new spacecraft that used the latest technologies from all countries to head to the node within a year. Ren Baqian's reward for coming back from the United States this time was to allow Ren Wanyan's company to participate in the exploration. The benefits of doing so were self-evident. Participating in the exploration would not only be able to receive information from the other side of the node, but also be able to obtain various technologies and experience during the construction of the spacecraft. It could be said to be a huge gain. In the future, if they really entered the interstellar era, the company could use this opportunity to expand their business to spaceship manufacturers. This was also what Ren Baqian needed. Therefore, what Ren Wanyan needed to do now was to recruit some aviation scientists and professionals. At the same time, Ren Baqian was also prepared to send some people to participate. Sword masters from another world. After all, time was tight in that world, and training talents and advancing technology couldn't be delayed. These sword masters were the most suitable. First of all, most of these sword masters didn't have many concerns. Second, they only moved in their own small circle and rarely interacted with outsiders. Moreover, the materials they needed could only be obtained from the other world, and they couldn't get rid of themselves. Finally, their learning ability was heaven-defying. According to what that foreigner said last time, we should be able to get out after climbing over that mountain in front. That is the border of the 60,000 mountains. Su Gongso looked into the distance and saw a wall-like mountain range standing between heaven and earth, covering his entire field of vision. Li Fu looked into the distance and was silent for a moment with mixed feelings. He said faintly, "We are going out. We should be the first batch of humans to go out in thousands of years, right?" Su Gongso laughed. As a top expert, it had been a long time since his blood had been so hot, and his mood hadn't been so upbeat. Don't forget that there was a group of people a few decades ago. Li Fu turned around and looked behind him. There were endless mountains and ferocious beasts everywhere. It was unknown how many people were buried here. They didn't go in this direction. Chi-Zitting followed their tracks, but I don't know where they went or whether they got out in the end. Su Gongso then changed the topic to the outside world. The homeland of our ancestors, the land where humans have lived for countless years. I'm really looking forward to what it will be like. Moreover, we can go further after we get out. Here, I can already feel the shackles that have been restraining me stirring. Li Fu stood there for a long time. His eyes lit up, and an inexplicable feeling rose from his body. It was as if something had broken out of the ground and revealed a bud. It was as if something had changed in his body, and everyone around him had noticed it. Li Fu ordered, "We will set off after resting for half an hour. Everyone, clean up all traces in the vicinity and don't let anyone know that we have been here. There are millions of humans behind us, so we can't be careless. Before we are ready, we must not let them discover us. Come, wonderful book house." Chapter 1132. The closer they got to the edge of the 60,000 mountains, the more astonishing the mountain range in front of them became. The entire mountain range was black and almost barren. It was thousands of feet high and almost perpendicular to the ground. It was difficult for apes and monkeys to climb, and even birds to cross. However, the top of the mountain was golden under the sun and looked strangely beautiful. Su Gongso's eyes were filled with fascination as he chanted loudly. 10,000 feet in the clouds, the sun and moon shine on the golden platform. Inu, who was 2 meters tall and had thick eyebrows and big eyes, said, "The yellow crane can't fly too fast, and the ape wants to climb." Great Xia emphasized literature, but there was little entertainment in this world. Most of the top experts had dabbled in music, chess, calligraphy, and poetry. If it was an Aboriginal expert, he could only sigh and say, "Damn, it's so F*** high and so F*** steep." Li Fu had these words in his mind, but he was too embarrassed to say them out loud. He was a blacksmith and had been running around all his life. Other than smithing, beating people, and surviving in the wilderness, he knew almost nothing else. This doesn't look like a cliff. It looks like a huge wall. The majesty of heaven and earth is really amazing. Inu, who was close to the cliff, couldn't help but say. The continuous mountain range that they could see from afar was now completely revealed to them. Other than a few cracks in the distance, the rest of the mountain range was a straight line of cliffs. There were layers of lines on the cliffs, as if they were formed by some kind of black substance that flowed down and solidified. Other than that, there was almost no place to stay. If it wasn't for the fact that the mountain range was so huge, they would have believed that it was a man-made wall that separated the 60,000 mountains from the other side. The 2 cracks that they could see were where the doors were. There are probably foreign tribes at the 2 cracks. Let's not alarm them and go up to the top to see what's going on, Li Fu said. As for the lack of a place to stay, it was easy to deal with. Su Gongso touched the surface of the cliff. It seemed to be made of metal and stone, but he didn't know what material it was. In fact, they had seen many things in the 60,000 mountains that they had never seen before, so they weren't surprised. Su Gongso pecked the cliff with his fingers, making a metallic sound. He only felt a strong force rebounding his fingers. He quickly shook his hand and took a few steps back. His fingers were slightly red and swollen. Everyone was surprised to see this. Su Gongso was one of the top 10 experts in the world, able to break steel with a casual strike. Yet, not only did he fail to damage the cliff in front of him, he even suffered a small loss. This isn't an ordinary rock, or this sentence was nonsense, and everyone could see it now. Let me try. Gao raised his right hand, and a long spear appeared in his hand. Su Gongso was one of the top 10 experts in the world, yet he could not even injure him with a single strike. Although he had not used his full strength, the sturdiness of the cliff in front of him was evident. In this way, the experts who were weaker than him and were mostly empty-handed didn't need to make a move. Gao was ranked around the 20th strongest expert in the world. The spear in his hand was extremely sharp, and it was a good opportunity for him to test it out. Following a few soft sounds, sparks burst forth. Gao Yi's expression changed slightly. Not only was this mountain wall incomparably hard, but there was also a rebounding force when the tip of the spear touched it, making him feel rather uncomfortable. He poured his divine will into the body of the spear, but in the end, it only left a few marks the size of rice grains on the cliff. I don't believe that every part of it is so hard. Gao Yi's expression changed, and his body moved continuously. Following his figure, from low to high, from left to right, the sounds of collisions rang out incessantly. This time, everyone's expression changed greatly. The cliff, with a circumference of a few hundred meters, was actually made of such a material. It was incomparably hard and difficult to destroy with human strength. Is this cliff really a natural wonder? How could human strength create such a vast mountain range? Even the ancient human emperors couldn't have done it. How exactly was this cliff formed? Everyone felt that it was inconceivable. Li Fu stared at the cliff with rapt attention. A short rod appeared in his hand, and he fiercely tapped it forward, like the sound of glass shattering. The cliff with a short rod landed cracked like a spider web. When the rod tapped it again, the cliff shattered into pieces, revealing a hole the size of a bowl. Everyone didn't know that Li Fu had already used the god's rod, which could see the weakness of an object and only made such a small hole. They only felt that he was worthy of being the world's #1 expert. The cliff that everyone was helpless against was broken in such a large piece with just one tap of his rod. This is metal? Someone picked up the broken piece and asked in surprise. It doesn't look like metal. It feels strange, somewhat like metal, but also like rock. Someone held it under the sunlight and said in surprise, "This thing can actually transmit light." One had to know that metals weren't able to transmit light. Most of the things that could transmit light were gems, crystals, jades, and other minerals like those in Dayo. However, this material was completely different to the touch. It was very rough, but it could transmit light, which amazed everyone. Li Fu tapped the ground with his rod again, causing the soil within a circumference of several meters to explode. The rock exposed below was as solid as the cliff wall. Following Li Fu's action, everyone started to work. In a short while, a large pit that was tens of meters deep was formed on the ground. The exposed base of the cliff was the same as the top. Only then did everyone give up. The things here are different from what we know in the past. Let's check out the situation of the two gaps first. Li Fu pondered for a moment and said, originally, he wanted to climb to the top of the mountain and check out the two gaps. However, he needed to use the god's rod to form a foothold to climb to the top of the mountain. Even with his full strength, he could only use the rod 6 times. It was 3 kilometers high, and each gap was 20 meters. He needed at least 150 gaps. In addition, the higher he climbed, the more difficult it would be and the greater the consumption. He estimated that it would take at least 1 to 2 months. Instead of doing this, it was better to check out the surrounding situation first. Go check out the 2 gaps and see if there's a place to climb to the top of the mountain. Be careful of the foreign races and don't get discovered. Li Fu ordered. In fact, when everyone came here, the situation of the cliff was almost the same as before. They couldn't see any place to climb to the top of the mountain, and they were just doing this while checking out the gaps. There were a total of 32 people present. After destroying the villages of the Thunder Barbarians and the 8-armed race, everyone was divided into 3 teams. One team was led by Chi Ziding and the other aboriginals to continue searching for the traces of the first emperor of Dayo and the ministers who had disappeared. The others were divided into 2 teams. One was to search for the scattered 8-armed race members, and the other was to find the exit. At the same time, if they encountered other foreign races and were discovered, they could use their superior strength to destroy the foreign race's village. One day later, everyone was within a radius of several kilometers of a gap. The roar of a monster could be heard in the distance. A moment later, everyone rushed over to investigate and found that it was a wild boar-like beast with scales and horns on its head. It was 7 meters tall and more than 12 meters long, standing there like a small hill. Even from a distance, they could feel the ferocity of the beast, which was at least at the level of a god. On the back of the beast, there were 3 hairy foreign races that looked like humans. There are indeed foreign races. No one was surprised. There were only 2 gaps within a radius of 500 kilometers. It would be strange if there were no foreign races. Be careful and observe from afar. Don't go near the east. That side is windy, and the beasts usually have a stronger sense of smell. An expert who looked like a child said. An expert who looked like a child said. His name was Golden Child, also known as Wealth Child. He was known for being rich, very rich, even richer than the royal family of the Great Xia dynasty. The imperial family of Great Xia only had a history of a few hundred years, but the Jin family had been around for thousands of years and had a deep foundation. There are some beast corpses tied to the beast. It seems that they have returned from hunting. Follow them carefully, and you'll be able to find their location. Just as they expected, these foreign races had returned from hunting and did not realize that a few humans were observing them from afar. There had been no beasts in the 2 boundaries here for more than 1,000 years. Hence, they were very relaxed and returned to the village with their prey. Everyone watched from afar as they left the 60,000 mountains, passed through the exit, and went to the outside world. At this point, everyone knew that the exit was about 5 kilometers wide and 5 kilometers thick. This meant that the mountain range was 5 kilometers thick and about 2,500 meters wide. However, they did not know if there were other foreign races, so they did not dare to act rashly. It was not until late at night that they finally found their way to the exit. As soon as they arrived, they could feel the strong wind blowing into their bodies and even into their minds. This wind is very beneficial to us martial artists. If we practice here, we will get twice the results with half the effort. I also feel that my bottleneck seems to have loosened by more than half. As long as we find a secluded place to practice in the outside world and spend some time, we will be able to break through, an expert said in surprise. Sure enough, the outside world is very different from where we came from. In this environment, practitioners who were originally stuck at the earth wheel level can also cultivate to the spirit wheel level. Everyone's faces were filled with wild joy. It was exactly as Rinpoche had said. As long as they could get out, everyone could advance further. Chapter 1133. The moment they returned to the palace, Qin Chuan and the others, who had changed their equipment for the better, happily carried their new equipment back to the palace. Originally, their weapons were made of steel. At most, they added some spare metal to make them sharper than ordinary weapons. They relied more on their immense strength and acceleration to cut through steel. Therefore, their weapons were rather heavy. They were able to unleash greater power and were less likely to be destroyed in a collision. Now that they had gone to Earth, they had changed into equipment made of alloy. It was much better than their original equipment. It was much sharper and tougher. The only flaw was that it was much lighter and felt like a feather when used. However, even if they didn't use it, it would still be a good family heirloom. Exinjia threw Lin Chaola back to Qingxin Palace Hall to recuperate, and the two of them went to bed. The next morning, Ren Baqian was woken up by a bite. He was bitten until he was dripping with blood. He wasn't sure if it could be considered a morning bite. In terms of time, it could be counted as a morning bite. The Empress bit open Ren Baqian's shoulder. Then, she gently licked his shoulder with her tongue and licked the blood clean. Her gaze was somewhat blurred. It was as if she wasn't licking blood, but sucking some white powder. Ren Baqian looked at the blurred gaze of the Empress and the blood stain at the corner of her mouth. That kind of evil temptation made him unable to resist biting her lips. It was very soft like jelly. However, no matter how hard he bit, he couldn't leave a mark. Instead, he was bitten by the Empress. Ren Baqian caressed the Empress's body and used all his strength to hold it. In the end, the official business turned into a hand-to-hand fight in broad daylight. This was war. In just 6 hours, Ren Baqian, who was reckless and dared to challenge the king, had no choice but to receive treatment from the doctor. After that, Dr. Shi simply waited outside the two's palace and had to treat Ren Baqian every 2 to 4 hours. The war that could have ended in 7 days became half a month. 7 days later, Ren Baqian returned to Earth riddled with wounds. The two of them destroyed more than 20 floors of the building. The rooms on the lower 3 floors were divided into multiple floors. Each floor was 60 centimeters thick. This was to reduce the damage caused when the two of them occasionally returned. Dividing a room into multiple floors was more practical and earthquake-resistant than filling the entire room with concrete. However, this was to no avail. First aid, body surface reinforcement, herbal nourishment, mechanical exoskeletons, and various other methods were used. There was a medical center on standby in Dayo and an emergency medical center on Earth at the same time. With this logistical support, Ren Baqian survived until the end of the war. The Empress let out a long moan and laid there lazily. The scissors on her body were like jade, smooth and exquisite, giving off a soft glow. On the other hand, Ren Baqian was paralyzed. The Empress, who had attained longevity heaven, was simply too powerful. To her, the slightest loss of control of her strength was a serious injury to him. Even though the Empress treated Ren Baqian as if he was the most precious and fragile porcelain, she still couldn't avoid such a fate. I was almost put into a box. I can't stop it all. Ren Baqian, who had regained consciousness, was very angry. He gave the Empress's pink buttocks a ruthless slap and pulled a piece of cloth to cover her buttocks. Then, he pressed the communication device and asked someone to carry him out for emergency treatment. Thanks to the medicines he had brought with him, the medical technology on Earth had improved a lot. This was especially true for external and bone injuries. With the many new medical equipment and the plants from the other world whose effects were reduced by half, the final treatment effect was almost as good as that of the other world. In terms of precision, it was even better. He fought from Dayo to Earth, from Earth to Dayo, and finally back to Earth. Ren Baqian was a living legend. In the eyes of many people, he was. The group of women between the ages of 20 and 50 looked at Ren Baqian with indescribable gazes. This was the first time they had seen someone with such fighting strength. What was even more tenacious was his will to fight. In fact, most people in the medical center felt that these two people were weirdos. Those who didn't know better would think that they were fighting to the death. In fact, the outcome was similar. First, Ren Baqian's exoskeleton was removed, followed by the enhanced cushioning protection on the surface of his body. Then he treated the comminuted fractures in his legs and hip bone, the fractured spine, and the moderately injured Xiao Baqian. Ren Baqian lay on the bed and casually browsed through the information on the internet. Currently, the internet was still full of the things that happened in the United States. However, some things were specious, and many things have been changed. As for the curved nodes of the universe, ordinary people wouldn't know about it for a short period of time. However, recently, there was a craze for learning the 34th set of exercises abroad. The strength that the Empress displayed was far beyond human imagination, and the majority of people who believed in science and technology turned to the embrace of personal strength. Beside Rinpoche were all kinds of equipment. Now, the room was similar to some medical institutions. The Empress was sitting beside the bed. She picked an apple in her hand, and the skin of the apple exploded, leaving only the inner flesh. After finishing this action, the Empress casually threw the apple to one side. There was already a pile of peeled apples there, and someone would come in every corner to take the peeled apples away. There was still a ton of unpeeled apples outside. There were also 10 carts of apples that had just been transported to the building. In theory, there seemed to be nothing wrong with peeling fruits for a seriously injured lover. However, in fact, the Empress was only satisfying a little bit of her inner imagination. In short, it was self-satisfaction. Perhaps it also had the effect of training one's own control of strength. In any case, Rinpoche guessed that the Empress didn't say anything. These 2 days, the students had been eating apples to the point of vomiting. The price of apples in all of Wuji City had risen slightly, and the prices of the better apples had risen even higher. A few days later, Rinpoche, who had recovered from half of his injuries, returned to Dayo. The official business that he had to deal with half a month ago had piled up until now. The most important thing was that Li Fu and the others had found the exit of the 60,000 mountains. In fact, this news had already been sent back 10 days ago, but it simply didn't have the opportunity to reach them. So far, 2 exits had been found, and there was a relatively large foreign tribe outside each exit. One of the tribes mainly tamed ferocious beasts and had a population of about 6,000. The strongest member of the tribe was a foreign race with the strength of a longevity heaven expert. There were 7 cardinal heaven experts, but there were also more than 15 ferocious beasts at the cardinal heaven level and 1 at the longevity heaven level. The other tribe only had 3,000 people. They had human bodies, scorpion tails, and bone spurs on their backs. Among them, there were 3 longevity heaven experts and 13 cardinal heaven experts. These foreign races and ferocious beasts didn't cultivate their spirits, so their strength was based on that of the aboriginals. Compared to the overall strength of the foreign races, these 2 foreign races weren't very strong. In fact, they could even be considered weak. From a certain point of view, they were just gatekeepers. In modern terms, they were security guards and night watchmen. However, they were already strong enough for the human race. Furthermore, this was only their strength on the surface. It was unknown if there was anything else that they hadn't discovered. After spending half a month investigating the strength of the foreign races, Li Fu and the others were divided into several teams. 2 of them stayed nearby to intercept the possible survivors of the 8-armed race, while the other 2 went in 2 different directions to investigate the situation in the distance. The other group of more than 30 people searched the depths of the 60,000 mountains for the location of the foreign races' villages. Chapter 1134. There was a steel knife above the head of lust. Beauty was like a saw that could cut through bones. Rinpoche vowed to devote himself to the modernization of Dayo and no longer indulge in women. He would turn over a new leaf and become a new man from today onwards. Half a year later, Rinpoche arrived at the garden where the Empress was and saw 2 guards burying something in the garden. There were bloodstains scattered on the ground. Rinpoche thought for a while and recalled a piece of news that envoys from the Chun nation would arrive in the past 2 days. The thing that was being carried at this moment gave him some guesses. After all, it seemed that no one had angered the Empress recently. In fact, no one could even come into contact with the Empress except for the palace maids and guards. The Empress was rather tolerant of the palace maids and guards. At least, she wouldn't bare her fangs unless they committed a grave mistake. The identity of the corpse that was being buried was obvious. He raised his head and asked, "Your Majesty, is it another envoy from the Chun nation? What's the reason this time? He looks too frivolous. That flower and that first-grade fantasy color." The Empress instructed the palace maids to dig up her favorite flowers and transplant them over. Rinpoche sighed slightly. The previous time, he was too ugly. The previous time, he was too short. This time, he was too frivolous. It seemed like the Empress was counting on the corpse of the Qin nation's envoy to fertilize her garden. After the news spread, the imperial court of the Qin nation would send a few unlucky fellows over after half a year. What was the reason for the Empress's next visit? His voice wasn't pleasant to hear. He hooked 3 fingers under the Empress's chin and was immediately bitten. The Empress immediately bit his middle finger and sucked the blood that flowed out. After a while, she let go with a blurry look in her eyes. The Empress had been addicted to this sweet and delicious snack for the past 6 months. Rinpoche would often be bitten awake. However, the Empress wouldn't drink more than 10 milliliters each time. With Rinpoche's physique, he could replenish it with 1 meal without any pressure. The previous massacre had activated a strange attribute in the Empress's body. It was unknown whether it was because of their dual cultivation, but the Empress especially liked Rinpoche's blood to the point of being addicted to it. As for the others, the Empress preferred to see the sight and sound of blood spurting out of their bodies rather than eating them. After a while, the Empress's serious days subsided. Then, she spoke about a problem that had been on her mind recently. Recently, there are more and more things that I have to deal with. I have to spend a lot of time and energy to deal with them. This has seriously slowed down the pace of my cultivation. Why don't you become the Prince Regent and control the entire court? This way, I can also devote more energy to cultivation. Rinpoche sneered. Should I put more energy into watching dramas? Prince Regent, are you going to spend the rest of your life alone and not see me for 10 days or half a month? Whoever wants to do it can do it, but I won't do it. Below only 1, above tens of thousands. Who knows how many people are fighting for this position? Looking at the history of the past few thousand years, it was unknown how many powerful ministers had used all sorts of methods in order to obtain this position, but how many of them had a good ending. You are personally appointed by me, and your status and knowledge are recognized by the court officials. The Empress continued to look at him expectantly. Huh. Rinpoche replied with a single word. Not far away, Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, and the imperial guards all had strange looks on their faces. If this conversation were spread, it would become a strange story. The Empress lay there lazily, squinted her eyes, and didn't look at him to express her current mood. The third exit has been discovered. It's 200 meters deep into the coast, and that's where the wall ends. There's a type of amphibious foreign race there, and their strength is similar to the 2 foreign tribes that were discovered previously. However, because they're in the sea, they can exert more strength. Li Fu opened up a heaven ascension ladder on the wall. It allowed people to climb over the wall and allow others to pass through using ropes. Outside the wall is a dry plain with large traces of destruction. It seems to have been caused by the war back then. After thousands of years, it still retains its original appearance, and almost no grass grows. As for the 2 tribes, they were guarding there, completely feasting on the ferocious beasts within the walls. In addition, they also discovered a caravan coming to that tribe in the past 6 months, which means that the 2 tribes are in regular contact with the outside world. It is best to keep them and smuggle them over. Otherwise, they will be exposed the next time the caravan comes. Rinpoche smiled and added, Of course, it's not possible to destroy the 2 tribes in a short period of time. These 2 tribes are already very strong for us. The Empress nodded slightly and said thoughtfully, This is good news. There are no foreign tribes in that dry plain, and we have more space to move around. I should go there to take a look. Rinpoche was silent for a while, then nodded and said, Yes. It's easier to improve your strength there than here. There is a component in the air that is very beneficial for improving strength, and I named it vitality. You can improve at the fastest speed there. In the face of the future crisis of the foreign races, the Empress had to go there and improve her strength to the highest level. There were many experts at the longevity heaven level in the 2 guarding tribes, and one could imagine the strength of the foreign races. Longevity heaven was nothing to the foreign races. The current human race was too weak compared to the foreign races. Are you coming with me? The Empress looked at Rinpochian. How was that possible? Rinpochian smiled bitterly. I can't leave this place. If we want to improve our technology as soon as possible, I have to be here. Besides, Erhua is also here. She hasn't even fully absorbed the power you left in her body. She has too many things to learn, so she can't go with you. They had been married for more than 7 years. Including the time they had spent on Earth, it had been more than 10 years. This was the first time they had been separated for so long. This was the reason why they hadn't mentioned this before. So, Prince Regent. The Empress looked at him with a smile. Rinpochian looked helpless. It seemed like he couldn't get rid of this position. However, he was prepared to transport the most advanced super brain on Earth to assist him in political affairs. Not only was it useful in political affairs, but it was also very useful in other aspects. The computing power of the super brain wasn't something that humans could compare with. The people from the Temple of Heaven are here. They have organized more than 20 spirit wheel experts, half of whom are top-notch experts who have condensed heaven-grade weapons. They will head to the 60,000 mountains and join the previous experts to encircle the foreign races. Let's hold a banquet tonight and let your majesty meet them. After that, your majesty will set off with them. The Empress licked her lips, looked at Rinpochian with a pair of charming eyes, and said, I'm afraid that you won't be able to practice dual cultivation with me for the next few years. This way, your cultivation speed will be even slower. I'm no longer interested in women. Rinpochian's expression changed. Is that so? The Empress's expression was difficult to understand. After a night of banquet, the original departure date of 1 week was changed to 1 month later. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Chapter 1135. Other people were happy for a month, but it was half a month of happiness for this novel. It was completely different from other flirtatious novels. Half a month later, Rinpochian was pushed to court in a wheelchair. Although there weren't any injuries on his body, being pushed to court was enough to make people look at him in a different light. At the same time, they expressed their sympathy. Being in love with the Empress was indeed something that everyone envied. However, it was also very dangerous. There were gains and losses, unless Rinpochian could keep up with the Empress's pace. From now on, Zhao Prince Consort will be promoted to regent and will govern the world on my behalf. The words of the Prince Regent represent my words, and the actions of the Prince Regent represent my orders. The first thing the Empress revealed was an earth-shattering piece of news. However, most of the officials weren't surprised. Only a few of the lower-ranking officials were shocked. The news that the Empress was going to the 60,000 mountains wasn't hidden from everyone. It was briefly mentioned at a banquet a few days ago. Your Majesty, what is the scale of this trip? Who will be accompanying me? Shi Qing was the first to speak. Everything will be simple. Deploy 500 winged cavalry warriors to accompany me. As for the rest, Yuan Sha, Lian Liang, Gu Yi, and 30 experts from the inspection department. Send 20 doctors from the medical bureau. The Empress gave orders one after another. The 6 ministers didn't move, but the officials from the cavalry department, the military department, and the Bureau of Taichung followed the Empress. These 3 departments were replaced by others. In addition, 1 heaven expert was transferred from each of the North, Northeast, and Central Protectorates. Nowadays, most of the experts in the world were in the 60,000 mountains, and the protectorates didn't need so many experts to suppress the world. For the next few days, the Empress accompanied Erhua when she wasn't attending court. As she neared her departure, she was much gentler to Erhua, like a real mother, which made him feel flattered. However, she also felt that something was amiss. These days, she sneaked out less and spent more time accompanying the Empress. At the same time, Rinpochian was unprecedentedly busy. First, he prepared all kinds of supplies and equipment for the Empress. He prepared a large amount of wine and desserts, which were dispensable items. He had prepared 2 sets of the newest air projection devices that he had seen in the fog capital. One of these devices could change the scenery of a space of 100 meters in length and width at most, and it couldn't be moved, so it was useful for hiding one's tracks. Of course, it could only be used to deceive one's vision. It had no effect on creatures that relied on smell and hearing as their main senses. However, if the distance was far, the effect would be great. For example, some ferocious beasts that could fly could easily discover people in the air, and after using this device, they would be able to hide their tracks extremely well. Hundreds of large alloy shovels were suitable for digging holes in the wilderness to conceal one's whereabouts. At the same time, the roaring emperor would also follow the empress. Other than that, there were binoculars, night vision goggles, a radio set, batteries, lights, drones, military tents, silk quilts, sleeping bags. Everything that could be carried, including basic necessities, food, shelter, and transportation. The most important equipment was, of course, concealment and reconnaissance equipment. There were also unconventional weapons, such as concentrated skunk bombs that could be used to target specific enemies. Most importantly, Ren Baqian also prepared 3 nuclear warheads for the Empress. They had a yield of 400,000, 790,000, and 3 million respectively. If she really encountered a strong enemy, these nuclear warheads could be used as a means to repel the enemy. As for how effective they would be, it would depend on the situation at that time. However, Ren Baqian also specially prepared more than 10 sets of self-installed armor for the Empress. It wasn't for use in battle, but to withstand a certain degree of damage in a close-range nuclear explosion. Coupled with the strength of the Empress's body, she would be able to survive as long as she wasn't within the range of the nuclear explosion. After all, when the Empress really wanted to use the nuclear warheads, the distance between the two parties would probably be very close. These sets of self-installed armor could be automatically installed in 3 seconds. Coupled with the nuclear warheads, they could be used to save her life when necessary. If possible, Ren Baqian really wanted to go with the Empress. This way, at least when they encountered danger, they could directly return to Earth. Unfortunately, he couldn't leave this place and could only do his best to prepare some things for the Empress. Fortunately, the Empress still had a killer weapon, which was the broken body of the human emperor. In case she encountered a strong enemy that she couldn't resist, this would be her last resort. The only regret was that this broken body could only be used 3 times. In addition, Ren Baqian was also busy implementing various government decrees. The first was to build roads and railways from Lan City to the 60,000 mountains. The second was to choose a place to build a signal relay station in the 60,000 mountains. The third was to find a place to build an airport and eliminate the ferocious beasts in order to find a route as much as possible. In the 60,000 mountains, it might not be possible to build a railway through the mountains, even after decades. Planes were the only fast means of transportation. The feather-type beasts in the 60,000 mountains were the ones that restricted this. Even some of the weaker heaven-level beasts could pose a great threat to planes. The air wasn't under the control of the aboriginals. Finding or killing a way out became the most difficult task, but it was something that had to be completed. The fourth was to build a new city at the entrance of the 60,000 mountains as a secondary capital. Many new cities would be built in the mountains as frontline bases. The fifth was to ban alcohol and enforce that at least 1/3 of the annual grain produced by each mu of land was to be sold to the imperial court. The sixth was to use books as the same language, vehicles as the same rails, and to unify weights and measures. The seventh was to expand the Department of Education and set up an education bureau with each city as a unit. Students from the various academies in the Yun Nation who had learned simplified Chinese would be transferred to each city. In each city, primary schools would be established that focused on language and mathematics, as well as intermediate and advanced schools that focused on mathematics, physics, and chemistry. Famous doctors from all over the country would be transferred to the Cataloging Bureau to compile medical records and establish medical schools. Elites from other industries will be transferred to the Cataloging Bureau to compile technical information for smelting and iron smelting industries and establish vocational schools. The eighth was to set up giant projections in several major areas of all the cities in the country to popularize simplified Chinese and basic mathematics. Rinpoche's goal was that regardless of whether they wanted to learn or not, they would be able to read the newspaper word by word every day. Even a pig would be able to understand half of the newspaper after 10 years. At the same time, the newspaper that was originally distributed in Dayo would be changed to 2 editions: simplified Chinese and the original language of this world. 2 years later, there would only be a simplified version of the newspaper. If they didn't learn simplified Chinese, then they would be eliminated along with the original language of this world. The ninth was to use the martial arts techniques of the sects that had been destroyed in Tianjin Basin and the Yun Nation as the foundation. The experts from the Temple of Heaven and the aboriginals who remained in the 2 nations would be mobilized to compile martial arts manuals and set up martial arts courses in primary schools and intermediate and advanced schools. The first few measures that Rinpoche promoted were to prepare for the future shift of focus and a large-scale advance. The last few were to improve the cultural foundation of Dayo as quickly as possible. Only with more cultured people could there be more talented people, which could promote the progress of productivity and promote the development of society and technology. These 9 measures were the main goals of Dayo for the next 5 years. They completely revealed Rinpoche's intentions and involved many levels of Dayo, from the commoners at the lowest level to the officials at the highest level. Rinpoche requested that the decree be promulgated and promoted as quickly as possible. No one was allowed to shirk the responsibility. No matter who it was, they would be severely punished if they were to shirk, delay, or defy these important plans that concerned the future of the nation. For the sake of these plans, Rinpoche even loaned 80% of the wealth that the imperial treasury had earned through various commodities over the years to the national treasury, without interest. His attitude was clear. He had even taken out his and Her Majesty's savings. If any of you didn't do a good job, don't blame me for falling out with you. Even if I could let you off, Her Majesty wouldn't. Chapter 1136. Time passed in a flash. Early in the morning, the gates of the palace opened, and Rinpoche and the Empress rode on Chishue's back. Hugging the body in her arms, the Empress relaxed her muscles and lay in his arms. "Let's go out of the city," the Empress said lazily to the people waiting outside. "Let's go out of the city first. It will be troublesome if there are too many people." In fact, the capital wasn't as congested as Lan City in the past. 10 lanes in both directions would be enough for a few decades. Moreover, the current traffic situation could be said to be empty. It was just that the Empress didn't want to go. It would take several years to go back and forth, and they wouldn't see each other again for another 10 to 20 years. "Your Majesty, you are the Emperor. If you meet an enemy, don't attack easily. A king should fight a king, and a general should fight a general. Let them attack ordinary enemies," Rinpoche said as he hugged the Empress. Most of the time, the Empress wouldn't attack easily, but when she was angry, she didn't care about anything else. "So long-winded," the Empress said softly. "As for the map found in the Emperor's tomb, I made a copy for you. Pay attention when you have the chance. You don't have to look for it, but if you meet it, you might as well investigate its secrets. If you have the chance, capture some of the foreign races, preferably alive. I always feel that those foreign races are strange, and I can't figure out why there's so many of them. Even if there aren't 10,000 of them, there are at least thousands of them. No matter how big that area is, there shouldn't be thousands of intelligent life forms under normal circumstances. It seems that all creatures have become intelligent in a short period of time, which is a little strange." Rinpoche said what he had been thinking about. "What's wrong?" the Empress asked. "I just feel that it's strange that there are so many races, but my feeling isn't accurate. Your Majesty, pay more attention when you have the opportunity and can make a judgment with more information." "Well, okay. Also, if you meet the Thunder Barbarians again, it's best to capture more of them alive. There is a component in their bodies that can greatly reduce electrical resistance and is resistant to high temperatures. It can be added to metals. With enough of it, the electrical resistance can be reduced to half under the same conditions, Rinpoche said. This was recently discovered in the laboratory from the Thunder Barbarian captives. The electrical resistance of the Thunder Barbarians was extremely low, far lower than that of ordinary creatures. It was probably related to their ability to control lightning. In any case, this characteristic of the Thunder Barbarians was very important. Not only could it greatly reduce the electrical resistance of materials, but it was also cheap and not difficult to obtain. If possible, it would be best to domesticate this race. Got it. That's all. The Empress listened from the palace all the way until they were out of the city. She was a little impatient and looked up at him. What do you want to hear? I'll tell you. Rinpoche smiled. After I'm gone, you have to be a woman. Say more. The Water Empress said with a smile. Rinpoche was dumbstruck. The Water Empress laughed, raised her eyebrows, and threatened. I will send someone to keep an eye on you. If I hear anything after I return, I will skin you alive. Your Majesty, you'd better skin Minister Qin alive first. Rinpoche muttered. That guy loved to drag him to the brothel. In any case, remember, the Empress sat up, landed in front of the ministers, and exhorted them. She hugged Hua again. When she saw him again, she probably wouldn't be able to hug him like this. Rinpoche jumped down and gave some instructions to the people of the Temple of Heaven. Zhongshang, the chief of the Temple of Heaven, personally led the team to fight against the foreign races and walk out of the 60,000 mountains. He had to participate no matter what. The establishment of the Temple of Heaven was related to this, but had been dominated by the foreign races for thousands of years. Whether it was to atone for his sins or for the ideals of generations of experts in the temple, Zhongshang felt that he was duty-bound. After another 2 hours, the Empress came to Rinpoche, hugged his neck in front of everyone, and bit his lips. In the eyes of others, it was a kiss, but Rinpoche knew that it was a real bite. Blood flowed out and was licked into her mouth. After a while, the Empress let go of his arms and said softly, Let's go. Be careful, Rinpoche said. If I can get away, I will go and take a look. Okay. The Empress nodded in agreement. She knew very well that it would take a long time. The Empress didn't waste any more time. She turned around and waved her arm forward. Let's go. Seeing that the team had started to move forward, she touched Hua's hair, kissed Rinpoche's lips, and licked the wound on his lower lip. She then jumped onto Chishue's back and left without looking back. After going far away, she waved her hand again, indicating that everyone should go back. Rinpoche only turned around when the Empress's figure disappeared from his sight, feeling a little lonely. It would be a long time before they could meet again. Zhao Prince Consort, if you are lonely, I will treat you to a drink tonight. Qin Chuan patted him on the shoulder and winked. Rinpoche sighed faintly and said, I still need to have some integrity. Let's wait for some time. Father, will the queen take a long time to return? Hua tugged at Rinpoche's sleeve and asked. Yes, a long time. Rinpoche touched her head. Hua immediately beamed with joy. Before the queen returned, she would be able to receive less beatings. Furthermore, her father didn't hurt when he hit her. After the Empress and the others left, Rinpoche arranged for people to build a ship. He was going to travel from the Yun Nation to the Chun Nation and then head south to see if he could find a sea route. There was a convective sea in the ocean of this world. Ships that entered the convective sea couldn't come out again, and there were all kinds of huge sea beasts. As a result, most fishermen lived in the coastal waters. There were many reefs in the coastal waters, so the development of a shipping industry was very poor. The huge ship that Zhuiyu from the Protectorate of the Southeast sent to the Empress was only used by the Chun Nation on the rivers. If it encountered sea beasts in the sea, it would be a dead end. This was already the largest ship in the Chun Nation. As a result, it was very difficult to develop the shipping and shipbuilding industries. However, it had to be done no matter how difficult it was. It was too time-consuming to pass through the 60,000 mountains, and the transportation capacity was too poor to support the logistics of the army. Sailing, airplanes, and using railway lines to pass through the 60,000 mountains couldn't be neglected. 2 months after the Empress set off, a piece of news made Rinpoche's face turn ugly for half a month. After wiping out the villages of the Thunder Barbarians and the Eight-Armed Race, Great Xia's experts were divided into two groups. One group was led by Li Fu and included Jiang Zixi, Su Gongso, and other experts. They searched for the survivors of the Eight-Armed Race as fast as they could and searched for the 60,000 mountains. The other group was led by Ma Hongyu and assisted by Du Qian. There were also more than 30 people. On one hand, they searched for traces of the Eight-Armed Race, and on the other hand, they searched for other foreign races. At the same time, they had to draw a topographic map. This group was ambushed by the herdsmen from the Acceptance Spirit Clan. They were 8 experts from the Acceptance Spirit Clan, more than 10 foreign races that were controlled by them, and a large number of jade-wasted slaves. After a huge battle, more than 30 experts suffered heavy casualties. 15 people died, 8 of them had condensed heaven-grade weapons, and the rest were almost all injured. On the other hand, only 2 herdsmen had died, and 6 of the dozen or so alien race experts that had been controlled had died. The herdsmen themselves weren't considered strong, but they were relatively fast. However, each herdsman controlled 2 cardinal heaven foreign races. In addition, there were a large number of jade-wasted slaves, some other strange methods, and ambushes. As a result, many of the experts suffered greatly. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse, that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.